Truman Capote, Breakfast at Tiffany's. I am always drawn back to places where I have lived, the houses and their neighborhoods. For instance, there is a brownstone in the East 70s where during the early years of the war, I had my first New York apartment. It was one room, crowded with attic furniture, a sofa, and fat chairs, upholstered in that itchy particular red velvet that one associates with hot days on a train. The walls were stucco, and a color rather like a tobacco spit. Everywhere, in the bathroom too, there were prints of Roman ruins, freckled brown with age. The single window looked out on a fire escape. Even so, my spirits heightened whenever I felt it in my pocket. The keys to this apartment. With all its gloom, it still was a place of my own, the first, and my books were there, and jars of pencils to sharpen, everything I needed, so I felt, to become the great writer I wanted to be. It never occurred to me in those days to write about Holly Golightly, and probably it would not now, except for a conversation I had with Joe Bell that set the whole memory of her in motion again. Holly Golightly had been a tenant in the old brownstone. She had occupied the apartment below me. As for Joe Bell, he ran a bar around the corner of Lexington Avenue. Still does. Both Holly and I used to go there 6-7 times a day. Not for a drink, not always, but to make telephone calls. During the war, a private telephone was hard to come by. Moreover, Joe Bell was good about taking messages, which in Holly's case was no small favor, for she had a tremendous many. Of course, this was a long time ago, and until last week, I hadn't seen Joe Bell in several years. Off and on, we'd kept in touch, and occasionally I'd stopped by his bar when passing through the neighborhood. But actually, we'd never been strong friends, except inasmuch as we were both friends of Holly Golightly. Joe Bell hasn't an easy nature. He admits it himself. He says it's because he's a bachelor and has a sour stomach. Anyone who knows him will let you know he's a hard man to talk to. Impossible if you don't share his fixations, of which Holly is one. Some others are ice hockey. They weren't our dogs. Our Gal Sunday, a soap serial he has listened to for 15 years. And Gilbert and Sylvan. He claims to be related to one or the other. I can't remember which. And so when late last Tuesday afternoon, the telephone rang and I heard, "Joe Bell here," I knew it must be about Holly. He didn't say so, just, "Can you rattle right over here? It's important." And there was a croak of excitement on his froggy voice. I took a taxi in a downpour of October rain. And on my way, I even thought she might be there, that I would see Holly again. But there was no one on the premises except for Prom Pater. Joe Bell's is a quiet place compared to most Lexington Avenue bars. It boasts neither neon nor television. 2 old mirrors reflect the weather from the streets, and behind the bar, in a niche surrounded by photographers of ice hockey stars, there is always a large bowl of fresh fruits that Joey Bell himself arranges with matronly care. That is what he was doing when I came in. "Naturally," he said, rooting a gladiolus deep into the bowl. "Naturally, I would not have got you over here if it wasn't what I wanted your opinion. It's peculiar. A very peculiar thing has happened." "You heard from Holly?" He fingered a leaf, as though uncertain of how to answer. A small man with a fine head of coarse white hair. He has a bony, sloping face, better suited for someone far taller. His complexion seems permanently sunburned. Now it grew even redder. I can't say exactly. Heard from her. I don't know. That's why I want your opinion. Let me build you a drink. Something new. They call it a white angel, he said, mixing 1/2 vodka, 1/2 gin, no vermouth, while I drank the result. Joe Bell stood sucking on Thames and turning over in his mind what he had to tell me. Then you recall a certain Mr. I.Y. Yunoshi, a gentleman from Japan. From California, I said, recalling Mr. Yunoshi perfectly. He's a photographer on one of the picture magazines, and when I knew him, he lived in the studio apartment on the top floor of the brownstone. Don't go mixing me up. All I'm asking, you know who I mean. Okay. So last night, who comes waltzing in here but this self-same Mr. I.Y. Yunoshi? I haven't seen him. I guess it's over 2 years. And where do you think he's been those 2 years? Africa. Joe Bell stopped crunching on his thumbs. His eyes narrowed. So how did you know? Read it in Winchell, which I said, as a matter of fact. He rang open his cash register and produced a manila envelope. Well, see, did you read this in Winchell? In the envelope, there were 3 photographs, more or less the same, though taken from different angles. A tall, delicate Negro man wearing a calico skirt and with a shy yet vain smile, displaying in his hands an odd wood sculpture and elongated carving of a head, and a girl's hair sleek and short as a young man's, her smooth wood eyes too large and tilted in the tapering face, her mouth wide, overdrawn, not unlike clown lips. On a glance it resembled most primitive carving, and then it didn't. For here was a spit image of Holy Golightly, at least as much of a likeness as a dark still thing could be. Now what do you make of that? Said Joe Bell, satisfied with my puzzlement. It looks like her. Listen, boy, and he slapped his hand on the bar. It is her. Sure, I'm a man fit to wear breeches. The little Jap knew it was her the minute he saw her. He saw her? In Africa? Well, just the statues are there. But it comes to the same thing. Read the facts for yourself, he said, turning over one of the photographs. On reverse was written, wood carving, S. Tribe, Tokaku, East Angelia, Christmas Day, 1956. He said, here's what the Jap says, and the story was this. On Christmas Day, Mr. Yunoshi had passed with his camera through Tukakoil, a village in the tangles of nowhere and of no interest, merely a congregation of mud huts with monkeys in the yards and buzzards on the roofs. He decided to move on when he saw suddenly a Negro squattering in a doorway, carving monkeys on a walking stick. Mr. Yunoshi was impressed and asked to see more of his work, whereupon he was shown the carving of the girl's head, and felt, so he told Joe Bell, as if he were falling in a dream. But when he offered to buy it, the Negro cupped his private parts in his hand, apparently a tender gesture comparable to taping one's heart, and said no. A pound of salt and $10, a wristwatch and 2 pounds of salt and $20. Nothing swayed him. Mr. Yonyoshi was in all events determined to learn how the carving came to be made. It cost him his salt and his watch, and the incident was conveyed in African and pig English and finger talk. But it would seem that in the spring of that year, a party of 3 white persons had appeared out of the brush riding horseback, a young woman and 2 men. The men, both red-eyed with fever, were forced for several weeks to stay shut and shivering in an isolated hut, while the young woman, having precisely taken a fancy to the woodcarver, shared the woodcarver's mat. "I don't credit that part," Joe Bell said squirmishly. "I know that she had her ways, but I don't think she'd be up to anything as much as that." "And then?" "Then nothing," he shrugged. "By and by she went like she'd come, rode away on a horse." "Alone? Or with the 2 men?" Joe Bell blinked. "With the 2 men, I guess." "Now the Jap." He asked about her up and down the country, but nobody else had ever seen her. Then it was as if he could feel my own sense of letdown transmitting itself to him, and he wanted no part of it. "One thing you got to admit. It's the only definite news, and I don't know how many." He counted on his fingers. "There weren't enough years. All I hope she's rich. She must be rich." "You got to be rich to go mucking around in Africa." "She's probably never set foot in Africa," I said, believing it. Yet I could see her there. It was somewhere she would have gone. And the carved head? I looked at the photographs again. "You know so much." "Where is she?" "Dear. Or in a crazy house, or married. I think she's married, and quieted down, and maybe right in this very city." He considered a moment. "No," he said, and shook his head. "I'll tell you why. If she was in the city, I would have seen her. You take a man that likes to walk, a man like me, a man's been walking in the streets going on 10 or 12 years, and all those years he's got his eye out for one person, and nobody's ever her. Don't it stand to reason she's not here? I see pieces of her all the time, a flat little bottom. Any skinny girl that walks fast and straight." He paused, as though too aware of how intently I was looking at him. "You think I'm round the bend." "It's just that I didn't know you'd been in love with her. Not like that." I was sorry I'd said it. It disconcentrated him. He scooped up the photographs and put them back in their envelope. I looked at my watch. I hadn't any place to go, but I thought it was better to leave. "Hold on," he said, gripping my wrist. "Sure, I loved her, but it wasn't that I wanted to touch her." And he added without smiling, "Not that I didn't think about that side of things, even at my age." And it'll be 67 January 10. It's a peculiar fact, but the older I grow, that side of things seems to be on my mind more and more. I don't remember thinking about it so much even when I was a youngster, and it's every other minute. Maybe the older you grow, the less easy it is to put thought into action. Maybe that's why it gets all locked up in your head and becomes a burden. Whenever I read in the paper about an old man disgracing himself, I know it's because of this burden. But he poured himself a jigger of whiskey and swallowed it neat. I'll never disgrace myself. And I swear it never crossed my mind about Holly. You can love somebody without it being like that. You can keep them a stranger who is a friend. 2 men came into the bar. and it seemed the moment to leave. Joey Bell followed me to the door. He caught my wrist again. Do you believe it? That you didn't want to touch her? I mean about Africa. At that moment, I couldn't seem to remember this story. Only the image of her riding away on a horse. Anyway, she's gone. Yeah, he said, opening the door. Just gone. Outside, the rain had stopped. There was only a mist of it in the air, and I turned the corner and walked along the street where the brownstone stands. It is a street with the trees that in the summer make cool patterns on the pavement, but now the leaves were yellowed and mostly down, and the rain had made them slippery. They skittled underfoot. The Yellowstone is midway in the block, next to a church where the blue tower clock tolls the hours. It has been slicked up since my day. A smart black door has replaced the old frosted glass, and grey elegant shutters frame the windows. No one I remember still lives there except Madame Sophia Spanella, a husky color tuna, who every afternoon went roller skating in Central Park. I know she's still there because I went up the steps and I looked at the mailboxes. It was one of these mailboxes that had first made me aware of Holly Golightly. I've been living in the house about a week when I noticed that the mailbox belonging to APT2 had a name slot fitted with a curious card, printed rather Carter formal. It read, Miss Holiday Golightly, and underneath in the corner, traveling. It nagged me like a tune. Miss Holiday Golightly? Traveling. One night, it was long past 12. I woke up at the sound of Mr. Yunoishi calling down the stairs, since he lived on the top floor. His voice fell through the whole house, exasperated and stern. Miss Golightly, I must protest. The voice that came back, welling up from the bottom of the stairs, was silly young and self-amused. Oh, darling, I am sorry. I lost the goddamn key. You cannot go on ringing my bell. You must please have yourself a key made. But I lost them all. I work, I have to sleep, Mr. Yoneshi shouted, but always you are ringing my bell. Oh, don't be angry, you dear little man. I won't do it again. And if you promise not to be angry, her voice was coming nearer. She was climbing the stairs and might let you take those pictures we mentioned. By now I'd left my bed and opened the door an inch. I could hear Mr. Yoneoshi's silence. Here because it was accompanied by an audible change of breath. When, he said. The girl laughed. Sometime, she answered, sluttering the word. Any time, he said, and closed his door. I went out into the hall and leaned over the banister, just enough to see without being seen. She was still on the stairs. Now she reached the landing, and the rag bag, colors of her body's hair. Tawny streaks, strands of albino blonde and yellow, caught the hall light. It was a warm evening, nearly summer, and she wore a slim, cool black dress, black sandals, a pearl choker. For all her chic thinness, she had an almost breakfast cereal air of health, a soap and lemon cleanness, a rough pink darkening in the cheeks. Her mouth was large, her nose upturned. A pair of dark glasses blotted out her eyes. It was a face beyond childhood, yet this side of belonging to a woman. I thought her anywhere between 16 and 30. As it turned out, she was shy 2 months of her 19th birthday. She was not alone. There was a man following behind her. The way his plump hand clutched at her hip seemed somehow improper, not morally, aesthetically. He was short and vast, sun-lamped and pomaded. A man in a butter-stressed, pinstripe suit with a red carnation withering in the lapel. When they reached her door, she rummaged her purse in search of a key and took no notice of the fact that his thick lips were nuzzling the nape of her neck. At least, though, finding the key and opening her door, she turned to him cordially. "Bless you, darling. You are sweet to see me home." "Hey, baby," he said, for the door was closing in his face. "Yes, Harry?" Harry was the other guy. "I'm Sid Arbuck. You like me." "I worship you, Mr. Arbuck." "But good night, Mr. Arbuck." Mr. Arbuck stared with disbelief as the door shut firmly. "Hey, baby. Let me in, baby. You like me, baby. I'm a liked guy. Didn't I pick up the check 5 people? Your friends? I never seen them before. Don't that give me the right you should like me? You like me, baby." He tapped on the door gently, then louder. Finally, he took several steps back, his body hunched and lowering as though he meant to charge it, crush it down. Instead, he plunged down the stairs, slamming a fist against the wall. Just as he reached the bottom, the door of the girl's apartment opened, and she poked out her head. "Oh, Mr. Arbuck." He turned back, a smile of relief oiling her face. She'd only been teasing. The next time a girl wants a little power room change, she called, not teasing at all. "Take my advice, darling. Don't give her 20 cents. She kept her promise to Mr. Yunushi. Or I assume she did not ring his bell again. For in the next days she started ringing mine, sometimes at 2 in the morning, 3 and 4. She had no qualms at what hour she got me out of bed to push the buzzer that released the downstairs door, as I had few friends and no one who would come around so late. I always knew that it was her, but on the first occasions of its happening, I went to my door, half expecting bad news, a telegram, and Miss Golightly would call up, "Sorry, darling, I forgot my key." Of course we'd never met, though actually in the streets we often came face to face. But she seemed not quite to see me. She was never without dark glasses. She was always well groomed. There was a consequential good taste in the plainness of her clothes, the blues and grays and lack of luster that made her herself shine so. One might have thought her a photographer's model, perhaps a young actress, except that it was obvious, judging from her hours. She hadn't time to be either. Now and then I ran across her outside our neighborhood. Once a visiting relative took me to 21, and there a superior table surrounded by 4 men, none of them Mr. Arbuck, yet all of them interchangeable with him, was Miss Golightly, idly, publicly combing her hair. At her expression, an unreleased yawn put by example, a dampener on the excitement I felt over dining at so swanky a place. Another night, deep in the summer, the heat of my room sent me out into the streets. I walked down 3rd Avenue to 51st Street, where there was an antique store with an object in its window I admired, a place of a bird cage, a mosque of minotaurs, a bamboo rooms yearning to be filled with talkative parrots. But the price was $350. On the way home, I noticed a cab driver, crowd gathered in front of P.G. Clark's salon, apparently attracted there by a happy group of whiskey-eyed Australian army officers bartoning Waltzing Matilda as they sang They took turns spin dancing a girl over the cobbles under the L, and the girl, Miss Golightly, to be sure, floated round in their arms light as a scarf. But if Miss Golightly remained unconscious of my existence, except as a adorable convenience, I became through the summer rather an authority of hers. I discovered from observing the trash basket outside her door that her regular reading consisted of tabloids and travel folders and astrological charts, that she smoked an esoteric cigarette called Pekingese, survived on cottage cheese and Melba toast, that her vari-colored hair was somewhat self-induced. The same source made it evident that she received V letters by the mail. They were always torn into stripes, like bookmarks. I used occasionally to plug myself a bookmark in passing. Remember, and miss you, and rain, and please write, and damn, and goddamn, were the words that reoccurred most often on the sleeps. Those and lonesome and love. Also, she had a cat, and she played the guitar. On days when the sun was strong, she would wash her hair, and together with the cat and Red Tiger's striped Tom, sit out on the fire escape, thumbing a guitar while her hair dried. Whenever I heard the music, I would go stand quietly by my window. She played very well, and sometimes sang too. Sang in the hoarse, breaking tones of a boy's adolescent voice. She knew all the show hits, Cole Porter and Kurt Weill. Especially she killed the songs from Oklahoma, which were new that summer and everywhere. But there were memories when she played songs that made you wonder where she learned them, where indeed she came from. Harsh, tender, wandering tunes, with words that smacked of piney woods or prairie. One went, "Don't wanna sleep, don't wanna die, just wanna go traveling through the pastures of the sky." And this one seemed to gratify her the most, for often she continued it long after her hair had dried, after the sun had gone, and there were lighted windows in the dust. But our acquaintance did not make headway until September, an evening with the first ripple chills of autumn running through it. I'd been to a movie, come home, and gone to bed with a bourbon nightcap and the newest Simon. So much my idea of comfort that I couldn't understand a sense of an unease that multiplied until I could read my heart beating. It was a feeling I'd read about, written about, but never before experienced. The feeling of being watched, of someone in the room. Then, an abrupt rapping at the window, a glimpse of ghostly gray. I slipped the bourbon. It was some little while before I could bring myself to open the window and ask Miss Golightly what she wanted. "I've got the most terrifying man downstairs," she said, stepping off the fire escape into the room. "I mean, he's sweet when he isn't drunk, but let him start lapping up the vino. And oh, my cruel beast, if there is one thing I loathe, it's men who bite." She loosened a gray flannel robe off her shoulder to show me evidence of what happens if a man bites. The robe was all she was wearing. "I'm sorry if I frightened you, but when the beast got so tiresome, I just went out the window." "I think he thinks I'm in the bathroom. Not that I give a damn what he thinks. The hell with him. He'll get tired. He'll go to sleep. My God, he should. 8 martinis before dinner and enough wine to wash an elephant. Listen, you can throw me out if you want to. I've got a gall burning on you like this. But that fire escape was damned icy. And you looked so cozy, like my brother Fred. We used to sleep 4 in a bed, and he was the only one that ever let me hug him on a cold night." By the way, do you mind if I call you Fred? She'd come completely into my room now, and she paused there, staring at me. I'd never seen her before not wearing dark glasses, and it was obvious how that they were prescription lenses. For without them, her eyes had an assessing squint, like a jeweler's. They were large eyes, a little blue, a little green, dotted with bits of brown, very colored, like her hair. And like her hair, they gave out a lively warm light. I suppose you think I'm very brazen. Oh, tres faux, or something. Not at all. She seemed disappointed. Yes, you do. Everybody does. I don't mind. It's useful. She sat down on one of the rickety red velvet chairs, curved her legs underneath her, and glanced around the room, her eyes puckering more pronouncedly. How can you bear it? It's a chamber of horrors. Oh, you get used to anything, I said, annoyed with myself for actually. I was proud of the place. I don't. I'll never get used to anything. Anybody that does, they might as well be dead. Her despairing eyes surveyed the room. What do you do here all day? And motioned towards a table tall with books and paper. Write things. I thought writers were quite old. Of course, Saroyan isn't old. I met him at a party. And really, he's not old at all. In fact, she mused, if he'd give himself a closer shave. By the way, is Hemingway old? He's 40s, I should think. That's not bad. I can't get excited by a man until he's 42. I know this idiot girl who keeps telling me I ought to go to a head shrinker. She says I have a father complex, which is so murd. I simply trained myself like older men, and it was the smartest thing I ever did. How old is W. Somerset Maugham? I'm not sure. 60-something? That's not bad. I'd never been to bed with a writer. No, wait. Do you know Benny Shacklet? She frowned when I shook my head. That's funny. He's written an awful lot of radio stuff. But Quill, Rat, tell me, are you a real writer? It depends on what you mean by real. Well, darling, does anyone buy what you write? Not yet. I'm going to help you, she said. I can too. Think of all the people I know who know people. I'm going to help you because you look like my brother Fred, only smaller. I haven't seen him since I was 14. That's when I left home, and he was already 6 feet tall. My other brothers were more your size, runts. It was the peanut butter that made Fred so tall. Everybody thought it was Dottie. The way he gorged himself on peanut butter. He didn't care about anything in the world except horses and peanut butter. But he wasn't Dottie, just sweet and vague, and terribly slow. He'd been in the 8th grade 3 years when I ran away. Poor Fred. I wonder if the army's generous with their peanut butter. Which reminds me, I'm starving. I pointed to a bowl of apples. At the same time, asked her how and why she'd left home so young. She looked at me blankly and rubbed her nose, as though it tickled, a gesture, saying, often repeated, I came to recognize as a signal that one was trespassing. Like many people with bold fondness for volunteering intimate information, anything that suggested a direct question, a pinning down, put her on guard. She took a bite of apple and said, Tell me something you've written. The story part. That's one of the troubles. They're not the kind of stories you can tell. Too dirty? Maybe I'll let you read one sometime. Whiskey and apples go together. Fix me a drink, darling. Then you can read me a story yourself. Very few authors, especially the unpublished, can resist an invitation to read aloud. I made us both a drink, and settling in a chair opposite, began to read to her, my voice a little shaky, with a combination of stage fright and enthusiasm. It was a new story. I'd finished it the day before, and that inevitable sense of shortcoming had not had time to develop. It was about two women who share a house, school teachers, one of whom, when the other becomes engaged, spreads with anonymous notes a scandal that prevents the marriage. As I read, each glimpse I stole of Holly made my heart contract. She fidgeted. She picked apart the butts and an ashtray. She mooned over her fingernails, as though longing for a file. Worse when I did seem to have her interest. There was actually a telltale frost over her eyes, as if she were wondering whether to buy a pair of shoes she'd seen in some windows. "Is that the end?" she asked, waking up. She floundered for something more to say. "Of course I like dykes themselves. They don't scare me a bit. But stories about dykes bore the bejesus out of me. I just can't put myself in their shoes." "Well, really, darling," she said, because I was clearly puzzled. "If it's not about a couple of old ball dykes, what the hell is it about?" I was in no mood to compound the mistake of having read the story with the farther embarrassment of explaining it. The same vanity that had led to such exposure now forced me to mark her down as an insensitive, mindless show-off. "Incidentally," she said, "do you happen to know any nice lesbians? I'm looking for a roommate." "Well, don't laugh. I'm so disorganized. I simply can't afford a maid. And really, dykes are wonderful homemakers. They love to do all the works. You never have to bother about brooms and defrosting and sending out the laundry. I had the roommate in Hollywood. She played in westerns. They called her the Lone Ranger, but I'll never say this for her. She was better than a man around the house. Of course, people couldn't help but think I must be a bit of a dyke myself, and of course I am. Everyone is. A bit. So what? That never discouraged a man yet. In fact, it seems to goad them on. Look at the Lone Ranger, married twice. Usually dykes only get married once, just for the name. It seems to carry such cachet later on to be called Mrs. Something Another." "That's not true." She was staring at an alarm clock on the table. "It can't be 4:30. The window was turning blue. A sunrise breeze banded the curtains. "What is today?" "Thursday." "Thursday?" She stood up. "My God," she said, and sat down again with a moan. "It's too gruesome. I was tired enough not to be curious." I lay down on the bed and closed my eyes. Still, it was irresistible. What's gruesome about Thursday? Nothing, except that I can never remember when it's coming. You see, on Thursdays I have to catch the 8:45. They're so particular about visiting hours. So if you're there by 10, that gives you an hour before the poor men eat lunch. Think of it, lunch at 11. You can go at 2, and I'd so much rather, but he likes me to come in the morning. He says it sets him up for the rest of the day. I've got to stay awake," she said, hunching her cheeks until the roses came. "There isn't time to sleep." I'd looked consumptive. I'd sag like a tenement, and that wouldn't be fair. A girl can't go to Sing Sing with a green face. I suppose not. The anger I felt at her over my story was ebbing. She absorbed me again. All the visitors do make an effort to look their best, and it's very tender. It's sweet as hell. The way the women wear their prettiest everything. I mean the old ones, and the really poor ones too. They make the dearest effort to look nice and smell nice too. And I love them for it. I love the kids too, especially the colored ones. I mean the kids the wives bring. It should be sad seeing the kids there, but it isn't. They have ribbons on their hair and lots of shine on their shoes. You'd think there was going to be ice cream. And sometimes that's what it's like to be visitors' room, a party. Anyway, it's not like the movies, you know, grim whisperings through a grill. There isn't any grill, just a counter between you and them. And the kids can stand on it to be hugged. All you have to do to kiss somebody is to lean across. What I like most? They're so happy to see each other. They've saved up so much to talk about. It isn't possible to be dull. They keep laughing and holding hands. It's different afterwards, she said. I see them on the train. They sit so quiet, watching the river go by. She stretched a strand of hair to the corner of her mouth and nibbled it thoughtfully. I'm keeping you awake. Go to sleep. Please, I'm interested. I know you are. That's why I want you to go to sleep. Because if I keep on, I'll tell you about Sally. I'm not sure that would be quite cricket. She chewed her hair silently. They never told me not to tell anyone. In so many words, she is funny. Maybe you could put it in a story with different names and whatnot. Listen, Fred, she said, reaching for another apple. You've got to cross your heart and kiss your elbow. Perhaps contortionists can kiss their elbow. She had to accept an approximation. Well, she said, with a mouthful of apple, you may have read about him in the papers. His name is Sally Tomato. And I speak Yiddish better than he speaks English. But he's a darling old man, terribly pious. He'd look like a monk if it weren't for the gold teeth. He says he prays for me every night. Of course he was never my lover. As far as that goes, I never knew him until he was already in jail. But I adore him now. After all, I've been going to see him every Thursday for 7 months. And I think I'd go even if he didn't pay me. This one's mushy, she said, and aimed the rest of the apple out of the window. By the way, I did know Sally by sight. He used to come to Joe Bell's bar, the one around the corner. He never talked to anybody, just stands there, like the kind of man who lives in hotel rooms. But it's funny to remember back and realize how closely he must have been watching me, because right after they sent him up, Joe Bell showed me his picture on the paper. Black Hand, Mafia. All that mumbo-jumbo. But they gave him 5 years. Along came his telegram from a lawyer. It said to contact him immediately for information to my advantage. You thought somebody had left you $1 million? Not at all. I figured Bergdorf was trying to collect. But I took the gamble and I went to see his lawyer. If he is a lawyer, which I doubt since he doesn't seem to have an office, just an answering service, and he always wants me to meet in Hamburg Heaven. That's because he's fat. He can eat 10 hamburgers and 2 balls of relish and a whole lemon meringue pie. He asked me how I'd like to cheer up a lonely old man. At the same time, pick up 100 a week. I told him, look, darling, you've got the wrong Miss Golightly. I'm not a nurse that does tricks on the side. I wasn't impressed by the honorarium either. You can do as well as that on trips to the power room. Any gent with the slightest chick will give you 50 for the girls. John and I always ask for a cup fare too. That's another 50. But then he told me his client was Sally Tomato. He said dear old Sally had long admired me. A la distance. So wouldn't it be a good deed if I went to visit him once a week? Well, I couldn't say no. It was too romantic. I don't know. It doesn't sound right. She smiled. You think I'm lying? For one thing, they can simply let anyone visit a prisoner. Oh, they don't. In fact, they make quite a boring fuss. I'm supposed to be his niece. And it's as simple as that. For an hour's conversations, he gives you $100. He doesn't. The lawyer does. Mr. O'Shaughnessy mails it to me in cash as soon as I leave the weather report. I think he could get into a lot of trouble, I said, and switched off a lamp. There was no need for it now. Morning was in the room, and pigeons were gargling on the fire escape. How? She said. Seriously? There must be something in the law books about false identity. After all, you're not his niece. And what about the weather report? She patted a yawn. But it's nothing, just messages I leave with the answer service. So Mr. O'Shaughnessy will know for sure that I've been up there. Sally tells me what to say. Things like, oh, there's a hurricane in Cuba. And it's snowing in Palermo. Don't worry, darling, she said, moving to the bed. I've taken care of myself a long time. The morning light seemed refracted through her. As she pulled the bed covers up to my chin, she gleamed like a transparent child. Then she lay down beside me. Do you mind? I only want to rest a moment. So let's don't say another word. Go to sleep. I pretended to. I made my breathing heavy and regular. Bells in the tower of the next-door church rang the hour. It was 6 when she put her hands on my arm, a fragile touch, careful not to waken. Poor Fred, she whispered, and it seemed she was speaking to me, but she was not. Where are you, Fred? Because it's cold. There's snow in the wind. Her cheek came to rest against my shoulder, a warm, damp weight. Why are you crying? She sprang back, sat up. Oh, for God's sake, she said, starting for the window and the fire escape. I hate snoops. The next day, Friday, I came home to find outside my door a Grand Lux Charles & Co. basket with her card. Miss Holiday Golightly, traveling, and scribbled on the back in a freakishly awkward kindergarten hand. Bless you, darling Fred. Please forgive the other night. You were an angel about the whole thing. Melly tender as holy. P.S. I won't bother you again. I replied, please do, and left this note at her door, with what I could afford, a bunch of street vendor violets. But apparently she'd meant what she said. I neither saw her nor heard from her, and I gathered she'd gone so far as to obtain a downstairs key. At any rate, she no longer rang my bell. I missed that. And as the days merged, I began to feel towards her certain far-fetched resentments, as if I were being neglected by my closest friend. And disquieting loneliness came into my life. But it induced no hunger for friends of no longer acquaintance. They seemed now like a salt-free, sugarless diet. By Wednesday, thoughts of Holly, of Sing Sing and Sally Tomato, of worlds where men forked over $50 for the powder room, were so constant that I couldn't work. That night I left a message in her mailbox. Tomorrow is Thursday. The next morning rewarded me with a second note in the playpen script. Bless you for reminding me. Can you stop for a drink tonight 6-ish? I waited until 6:10, then made myself delay 5 minutes more. A creature answered the door. He smelled of cigars and Kniz cologne. His shoot spotted elevated hills. Without these added inches, one might have taken him for a little person. His bald, freckled head was dwarf big. Attached to it were a pair of pointed, truly elfin ears. He had Pekingese eyes, unpitying and slightly bulged. Tufts of hair spouted from his ears, from his nose. His jaws were gray, with afternoon beard, and his handshake almost fury. "Kids in the shower," he said, motioning a cigar towards the sound of water hissing in another room, the room in which we stood. We were standing because there was nothing to sit on. Seemed as though it were being just moved into. You expected to smell wet paint. Suitcases and unpacked crates were the only furniture. The crates served as tables. One supported the mittings of a martini, another a lamp, a Liberty phone, Holly's red cat, and a ball of yellow roses. Bookcases covering one wall boasted a half shelf of literature. I warmed to the room at once. I liked its fly-by-night look. The man cleared his throat. "You expected?" He found my nod uncertain. His cold eyes operated on me. Made neat, exploratory incisions. A lot of characters come here. They're not expected. You know the kid long? Not very. So you don't know the kid long. I live upstairs. The answer seemed to explain enough to relax him. You got the same layout? Much smaller. He tapped ash on the floor. This is a dump. This is unbelievable. But the kid don't know how to leave even when she's got the dough. His speech had a jerky, metallic rhythm, like a teletype. So, he said, "What do you think? Is she or ain't she?" "Ain't she what? A phony?" "I wouldn't have thought so." "You're wrong. She's a phony." "But on the other hand, you're right. She isn't a phony because she's a real phony. She believes all this crap she believes. You can talk her out of it." I've tried with tears running down my cheeks. Benny Pullen, respected everywhere. Benny Pullen tried. Benny had it on his mind to marry her. She don't go for it. Benny spent maybe thousands sending her to head shrinkers, even the famous ones. The one can only speak German. Boy, did he throw in the towel. You can't talk her out of this. He made a fist, as though to crush an intangible ideas. Try it sometime. Get her to tell you some of her stuff she believes. Mind you, he said, I like the kid. Everybody does. But there's a lot that don't. I do. I sincerely like the kid. I'm sensitive. That's why. You've got to be sensitive to appreciate her. A streak of her poet. But I'll tell you the truth. You can beat your brains out for her, and she'll hand you a horse shit on a platter. To give an example, who is she like you see her today? She's strictly a girl who'll read where she ends up, as at the bottom of the bottle of signals. I've seen it happen more times than you've got toes. And those kids, they weren't even nuts. She's nuts. But young, and with a great deal of youth ahead of her. If you mean future, you're wrong again. Now, a couple of years back, out on the coast, there was a time it could have been different. She had something working for her. She had them interested. She could have really rolled. But when you walk out on a thing like that, you don't walk back. Ask Louise Rayner. And Rayner was a star. Sure, Holly was no star. She never got out of the still department. But that was before the story of Dr. Westweasel. Then she could have really rolled. I know, see? 'Cause I'm the guy she was giving her the push. He pointed the cigar at himself. O.G. Behrman. He expected recognition, and I didn't mind obliging him. It was all right by me, except I'd never heard of O.G. Behrman. It developed that he was a Hollywood actor's agent. I'm the first one who saw her. Out at Santa Anita. She's hanging around the track every day. I'm interested, professionally. I found out she's some jock's regular. She's living with a shrimp. I get the jock, told drop it. And he don't want conversation with the vice boys. See, the kid's 15, but stylish. She's okay. She comes across, even when she's wearing glasses, this thick. Even when she opens her mouth and you don't know if she's a hillbilly or an Okie or what. I still don't. My guess, nobody'll ever know where she came from. She's such a goddamn liar. Maybe she don't know herself anymore, but it took us a year to smooth out that accent. How we did it finally. We gave her French lessons. After she could imitate French, it wasn't too long she could imitate English. We modeled her along the Margaret Souvenir type, but she could pinch some curves of her own. People were interested. Big ones. And to top it all, Benny Pullen, a respected guy. Benny wants to marry her. An agent could ask for more. Then wham, the story of the Dr. Weasel. You see that picture? Cecil B. DeMille. Gary Cooper. Jesus, I kill myself. It's all set. They're going to test her for the part of Dr. Weasel's nurse. One of his nurses anyway. That's wham. The phone rings. He picked a telephone out of the air and held it to his ear. She says, "This is Holly." I say, "Honey, you sound far away." She says, "I'm in New York." I say, "What the hell are you doing in New York when it's Sunday and you got the test tomorrow?" She says, "I'm in New York 'cause I've never been to New York." I say, "Get your ass on a plane and get back here." She says, "I don't want it." And say, "What's your angle, doll?" She says, "You got to want to be good and I don't want it." I say, "Well, what the hell do you want?" And she says, "When I find out, you'll be the first one to know." See what I mean? Horse shit on a platter. The red cat jumped off its crate and rubbed against his leg. He lifted the cat on the toes of his shoe and gave him a toss, which was hateful of him, except he seemed not aware of the cat, but merely his own irritableness. "This is what she wants?" he said, flinging out his arms. "A lot of characters they are not expected. Living off tips, running around with bumps. So maybe she could marry Rusty Trawler? You should pin a medal on her for that." He waited, glaring. "Sorry, I don't know him." "You don't know Rusty Trawler? You can't know much about the kid." "Bad deal," he said, his tongue clucking, in his huge head. "I was hoping you maybe had influence, could travel with the kid before it's too late. But according to you, it already is." He blew a smoke ring, let it fade before he smiled. The smile altered his face, made something gentle happen. "I could get it rolling again. Like I told you," he said, and now it sounded true. "I sincerely like the kid. What scandals are you spreading, OG?" Holly splashed into the room, a towel more or less wrapped round and her wet feet dripping footmarks on the floor. "Just the usual. That you're nuts. Fred knows that already, but you don't." "Light me a cigarette, darling," she said, snatching me off a bathing cap and shaking her hair. "I don't mean you, OG. You're such a slope. You always nigger's lip." She scooped up the cat and swung him on her shoulder. He perched. There was a balance of a bird. His paws tangled in her hair, as if we were knitting yarn. And yet, despite these amiable antics, it was a grim cat with a pirate's cutthroat face. One eye was a glue blind, the other sparkled with dark deeds. "OG is a slop," she told me, taking the cigarette Ed lighted. But he does know a terrific lot of phone numbers. What's David O. Selznick's number, OG? Lay off. It's not a joke, darling. I want you to call him up and tell him what a genius Fred is. He's written barrels of the most marvelous stories. Well, don't blush, Fred. You didn't say you were a genius. I did. Come on, OG. What are you going to do to make Fred rich? Suppose you let me settle that with Fred. Remember, she said, leaving us. I'm his agent. Another thing, if I holler, come zipper me up. And if anybody knocks, let them in. A multitude did. Within the next quarter hour, a stag party had taken over the apartment, several of them in uniform. I counted 2 naval officers and an Air Force colonel. But they were outnumbered by graying arrivals beyond draft status except for a lack of youth. The guests had no common theme. They seemed strangers among strangers. Indeed, each face on entering had struggles to conceal dismay at seeing others there. There was as if the hostess had distributed her invitations while zigzagging through various bars, which was probably the case. After the initial frowns, however, they mixed without grumbling, especially O.G. Behrman, who avidly exploited the new company to avoid discussing my Hollywood future. I was left abandoned by the bookshelves. Of the books there, more than half were about horses, the rest baseball. Pretending an interest in horseflesh and how to tell it gave me sufficiently private opportunity for sizing Holly's friends. Presently one of these became prominent. He was a middle-aged child that had never shed its baby fat. Though some gifted tailor had almost succeeded in camouflaging his plump and spankable bottom, there wasn't a suspicion of bone in his body. His face, a zero filled with pretty miniature features, had an unused virginal quality. It was as if he'd been born, then expanded, his skin remaining unlined as a blown-up balloon, and his mouth, though already for qualls and tantrums, a spoiled sweet puckering. But it was not appearance that sniggled him out. Preserved infants aren't all that rare. It was rather his conduct. For he was behaving as though the party were his, like an energetic octopus. He was shaking martinis, making introductions, manipulating the gramophone. In fairness, most of his activities were dictated by the hostess herself. Rusty, would you mind? Rusty, would you please? If he was in love with her, then clearly he had his jealousy in check. A jealous man might have lost control, watching her as she skimmed around the room, carrying her cat in one hand but leaving the other free to straighten a tie and remove lint. The Air Force colonel wore a medal that came in for quite a polish. The man's name was Rutherford, Rusty Trawler. In 1908, he'd lost both his parents, his father the victim of an anarchist and his mother of shock, which double misfortune had made Rusty an orphan, a millionaire, and a celebrity, all at the age of 5. He'd been a standby of the Sunday supplements ever since, a consequence that had gathered hurricane momentum when still a schoolboy. He had caused his godfather, custodian, to be arrested on charges of sodomy. After that, marriage and divorce sustained his place in the tabloid Sun. His first wife had taken herself and her alumni to a rival of father's divines. The second wife seems unaccounted for, but the third had sued him in New York State with a full satchel of the kind of testimony that entails. He himself divorced his last Mrs. Troll, his principal complaint stating that she'd started a mutiny aboard his yacht. Said mutiny resulting in his being deposited on the dry Torangas. The war he'd proposed to Unity Mitford. At least he was supposed to have sent a cable offering to marry her, if Hitler didn't. This was said to be the reason Winchell always referred to himself as a Nazi. That and the fact that he has attended rallies in Yorkville. I was not told these things. I read them in the baseball guide, another selection of Holly's shelf which she seemed to use for a scrapbook. Tucked between the pages were Sunday features, together with scissored snippings from gossip columns. Rusty Troll and Holly Golightly, 2 on the ale at. One touch of Venus. Preem, Holly came up from behind and caught me reading. Miss Holiday Golightly, of the Boston Golightleys, making every day a holiday for the 24-carat Rusty Troller. Admiring my publicity. Or are you just a baseball fan? She said, adjusting her dark glasses as she glanced over my shoulder. I said, what was this week's weather report? She winked at me, but it was humorous, a wink of warning. I'm all for horses, but I loathe baseball, she said. And the sad message in her voice was saying she wished for me to forget she'd ever mentioned Sally Tomato. I hate the sound of it on the radio, but I have to listen. It's a part of my research. There's so few things men can talk about. If a man doesn't like baseball, then he must like horses. And if he doesn't like either of them, well, I'm in trouble anyway. He don't like girls. And how are you making out with OG? We've separated by mutual agreement. He's an opportunity, believe me. I do believe you. But what have I to offer that would strike him as an opportunity? She persisted. Go over there and make him think he isn't funny looking. He really can help you, Fred. I understand you weren't too appreciative. She seemed puzzled until I said, the story of Dr. Weasel. He's still harping, she said, and cast across the room an affectionate look at Bearman. But he's got a point. I should feel guilty. Not because they would have given me the part or because I would have been good. They wouldn't, and I wouldn't. If I do feel guilty, I guess it's because I let him go on dreaming when I wasn't dreaming a bit. I was just vamping for time to make a few self-improvements. I knew damn well I'd never be a movie star. It's too hard. And if you're intelligent, it's too embarrassing. My complexes aren't inferior enough. Being a movie star and having a big, fat ego are supposed to go hand in hand. Actually, it's essential not to have any ego at all. I don't mean I'd mind being rich and famous. That's very much on my schedule, and someday I'll try to get around to it. But if it happens, I'd like to have my ego tagging along. I want to still be me when I wake up one fine morning and have breakfast at Tiffany's. You need a glass, she said, noticing my empty hands. Rusty, will you bring my friend a drink? She was still hugging the cat. Poor Slop, she said, tickling his head. Poor Slop without a name. It's a little inconvenient his not having a name. But I haven't any right to give him one. We'll have to wait until he belongs to somebody. We just sort of took up by the river one day. We don't belong to each other. He's an independent, and so am I. I don't want to own anything until I know I've found the place where me and things belong together. I'm not quite sure where that is just yet, but I know what it's like. She smiled and let the cat drop on the floor. It's like Tiffany's, she said. Not that I give a hoot about jewelry. Diamonds, yes, but it's tacky to wear diamonds before you're 40, and even that's risky. They only look right on the really old girls. Maria Spenskaya. Wrinkles and bones, white hair and diamonds. I can't wait. But it's not why I'm mad about Tiffany's. Listen, you know those days when you've got the mean reds? Same as the blues? No, she said slowly. No, the blues are because you're getting fat, or maybe it's been raining too long. You're sad, that's all. But the mean reds are horrible. You're afraid that you'll sweat like hell, but you don't know what you're afraid of, except something bad is going to happen. Only you don't know what it is. You've had that feeling? Quite often. Some people call it angst. All right, angst. But what do you do about it? Well, a drink helps. I've tried that. I've tried aspirin too. Rusty thinks I should smoke marijuana, and I did it for a while, but it only makes me giggle. What I've found does the most good is just to get into a taxi and go to Tiffany's. It calms me down right away. The quietness and the proud look of it. Nothing very bad could happen to you there. Not with those kind of men and their nice suits, and that lovely smell of silver and alligator wallets. If I could find a real-life place that made me feel like Tiffany's, then I'd buy some furniture and give the cat a name. I've thought maybe after the war, Fred and I. She pushed up her dark glasses, and her eyes, the differing colors of them, the grays and wisps of blue and green, had taken on a far-seeing sharpness. I went to Mexico once. It's wonderful country for raising horses. I saw one place near the sea. Fred's good with horses. Rusty Trawler came carrying a martini. He handed it over without looking at me. I'm hungry, he announced, and his voice retarded, as the rest of him produced an unvarying red wine that seemed to blame Holly. It's 7:30, and I'm hungry. You know what the doctor said. Yes, Rusty, I know what the doctor said. Well, then break it up. Let's go. I want you to behave, Rusty. She spoke softly, but there was a governess thread of punishment in her tone that caused the odd flush of pressure or of gratitude to ping his face. You don't love me, he complained, as though they were alone. Nobody loves naughtiness. Obviously, she said that what he wanted to hear. It appeared to both excite and relax him. Still uncontinued, as though it were a ritual. Do you love me? She petted him. Tend to your chores, Rusty. And when I'm ready, we'll go eat whatever you want. Chinatown? But that doesn't mean sweet and sour spare ribs. You know what the doctor said. As he returned to his duties, with a fascinated waddle, I couldn't resist reminding her that she hadn't answered his question. Do you love him? I told you, you can make yourself love anybody. Besides, he had a stinking childhood. If it was so stinking, why does he cling to it? Use your head. Can't you see? It's just that Rusty feels safer in diapers than he would in a skirt, which is really the choice. Only he is awfully touchy about it. He tried to stab me with a butter knife because I told him to grow up and face the issue, settle down, and play house with a nice fatherly truck driver. Meantime, I've gotten him on my hands, which is okay. He's harmless. He thinks girls are dolls, literally. Thank God. Well, if it were true of most men, I'd hardly be thanking God. I mean, thank God you're not going to marry Mr. Trawler. She lifted an eyebrow. By the way, I'm not pretending I don't know he's rich. Even land in Mexico costs something. Now she said, motioning me forward. Let's get hold of OG. I held back while my mind worked to win a postponement. Then I remembered. Why traveling? Oh, my card, she said, disconcentrated. You think it's funny? Not funny, just provocative. She shocked. After all, how do I know where I'll be leaving tomorrow? So I told them to put traveling. Anyway, it was a waste of money ordering those cards, except I felt I owed it to them to buy some little something. They're from Tiffany's. She searched for my martini. I hadn't touched it. She drained it drained it in 2 swallows and took my hand. "Quit stalling. You're going to make friends with OG." An occurrence at the door intervened. It was a young woman, and she entered like a windrush. A squall of scarves and jangling cold. "Holy," she said, wagging a finger as she advanced. "You miserable hoarder, hogging all this simply reinventing men." She was well over 6 feet, taller than most men there. They straightened their spines, sucked in their stomachs. There was a general contest to match her swaying height. Holly said, "What are you doing here?" And her lips were taut as drawn string. "Why, nothing, sugar. I've been upstairs, working with Yunyoshi. Christmas stuff for the bazaar. But you sound vexed, sugar." She scattered a roundabout smile. "You boys not vexed at me for butting in on your party?" Rusty Trawler tilted. He squeezed her arm, as though to admire her muscle, and asked her if she could use a drink. "I sure could," she said. "Make mine bourbon." Holly told her there isn't any, whereupon the Air Force Colonel suggested he ran out for a bottle. "Oh, I declare." "Don't. Let's have a fuss. I'm happy with ammonia." "Holly, honey," she said, slightly shoving her. "Don't you bother about me. I can introduce myself." She stooped towards O.G. Berman, who, like many short men, in the presence of tall women, had an aspiring mist in his eye. "I'm Meg. Wildwood. From Wildwood, Arkansas. That's hill country." It seemed a dance Berman performing for some fancy footwork to prevent his rivals cutting in. He lost her to a quadrille of partners who gobbled up her stammered jokes like a popcorn tossed to pigeons. It was a comprehensible success. She was a triumph over ugliness, so often more rebuggling than real beauty, if only because it contains paradox. In this case, as opposed to the sculptor's method of plain good taste and scientific grooming, the trick had been worked by exaggerating defects. She'd made them ornamental by admiring them boldly. Heels that emphasized her height, so steep her ankles bulged. A flat, tight bodice that indicated she could go on a beach in bathing trunks. Hair that was pulled straight back, accelerating the spareness, the starvation of her fashion model face. Even the stutter, certainly genuine but still a bit laid on, had been turned to advantage. It was the master stroke, that stutter. For it contrived to make her banality sound somehow original, and secondly, despite her tallness, her assurance, it served and inspire in male listeners a protective feeling. To illustrate, Berman had to be pounded on the back because she said, "Who can tell me where is the John?" Then completing the cycle, he offered an arm to guide her himself. "That," said Holly, "won't be necessary. She's been here before. She knows where it is." She was emptying ashtrays, and after Meg Wildwood had left the room, she emptied another, then sighed rather. "It's really very sad." She paused long enough to calculate the number of inquiring expressions. It was sufficient. And so mysterious. You'd think it would show more. But heaven knows she looks healthy, so, well, clean. That's the extraordinary part, wouldn't you? She asked with concern. But if no one in particular, wouldn't you say she looked clean? Someone coughed, several swallowed. A naval officer who had been holding Meg Wildwood's drink put it down. "But then," said Holly, "I hear so many of these southern girls have the same trouble." She shuddered delicately and went to the kitchen for more ice. Meg Wildwood wouldn't understand it. The abrupt absence of warmth on her return. The conversations she began behaved like green logs. They fumed, but would not fire. More unforgivably, people were leaving without taking her telephone number. The Air Force colonel decamped while her back was turned, and this was the straw too much. He'd asked her to dinner. Suddenly she was blind, and since gin to artifice beers, the same relations as tears to mascara, her attractions as once dissembled. She took it out on everyone. She called her hostess a Hollywood degenerate. She invited a man in his 50s to fight. She told Berman Hitler was right. She exhilarated Rusty Trawler by stiff-arming him into a corner. "You know what's going to happen to you," she said, with no hint of a stutter. "I'm going to march you over to the zoo and feed you to the yak." He looked altogether willing, but she disappointed him by sliding to the floor, where she said, humming. "You're a bore. Get up from there," Holly said, stretching on a pair of gloves. The remnants of the party were waiting at the door, and where the bore didn't budge, Holly cast an apologetic glance. "Be an angel, would you, Fred? Put her in a taxi. She lives at the Winslow." "Don't live Barbizon." "Regnant 45700. Ask for Meg Wildwood. You are an angel, Fred." They're gone. The prospect of steering an Amazon into a taxi obliterated whatever resentment I felt. But she solved the problem herself, rising on her own steam. She stared down at me with a lurching loftiness. She said, "Let's go, stork." Catch lucky balloon, and fell full length like an exed oak. My first thought was to run for a doctor, but examination proved her pulse fine and her breathing regular. She was simply asleep. After finding a pillow for her head, I left her to enjoy it. The following afternoon, I collided with Holly on the stairs. "You," she said, hurrying past with a package from the druggist. "There she is, on the verge of pneumonia, a hangover out to here, and the mean reds on top of it." I gathered from this that Meg Wildwood is still in the apartment, but she gave me no chance to explore her surprising sympathy. Over the weekend, mystery deepened. First, there was the Latin, who came to my door, mistakenly, for he was inquiring after Miss Wildwood. It took a while to correct his error. Our accents seemed manually incoherent, but by the time I was charmed. He'd been put together with care. His brow had a bullfighter's figure, had an exactness, a perfection, like an apple, an orange, something nature has made just right. Added to this, decoration, were an English suit and a brisk cologne, and, what is still more un-Latin, a bashful manner. The second event of the day involved him again. It was toward evening, and I saw him on my way out to dinner. He was arriving in a taxi. The driver helped him totter into the house with a load of suitcases. That gave me something to chew on. By Sunday, my jaws were quite tired. Then the picture became both darker and clearer. Sunday was an Indian summer day. The sun was strong. My window was open, and I heard voices on the fire escape. Holly and Meg were sprawled there on a blanket, the cat between them. Their hair, newly washed, hung limply. They were busy. Holly varnishing her toenails, Meg knitting on a sweater. Meg was speaking. "If you ask me, I think you're lucky. At least there's one thing you can say for Rusty. He's an American. Bully for him. Sugar. There's a war on. And when that's over, you've seen the last for me, boy. I don't feel that way. I'm proud of my country. The men in my family were great soldiers. There's a statue of Papa Daddy, Wildwood, smack in the center of Wildwood. Fred's a soldier, said Holly, but I doubt he'll ever be a statue. Could be. They'll say the more stupid you are, the braver. He's pretty stupid. Fred's the boy upstairs. I didn't realize he was a soldier, but he does look stupid. Yearning, not stupid. He wants awfully to be on the inside, staring out. Anybody with their nose pressed against the glass is liable to look stupid. Anyhow, he's a different Fred. Fred's my brother. You call your own flesh and blood stupid? If he is, he is. Well, it's poor taste to say so. A boy that's fighting for you and me and all of us. What is this, a bond rally? I just want you to know where I stand. I appreciate a joke, but underneath I'm a serious person, proud to be an American. That's why I'm sorry about Joe's. She put down her knitting needles. Do you think he's terribly good looking? Don't you? Holly said, and swiped the cat's whiskers with her lacquer brush. If only I could get used to the idea of marrying a Brazilian and being a Brazilian myself. It's such a canoe to cross. 6,000 miles and not knowing the language. Go to Berlitz. Why on earth would they be teaching Portuguese? Isn't it as though anyone spoke it? No, my only chance is to try and make Joes forget politics and become an American. It's such an useless thing for a man to want to be. The president of Brazil. She sighed and picked up her knitting. I must be madly in love. You saw us together. Do you think I'm madly in love? Well, does he bite? Mag dropped the stitch. Bite? You, in bed. Why? No. Should he? Then she added, censoriously, but he does love. Good. That's the right spirit. I like a man who sees the humor. Most of them, they're all pant and puff. Meg withdrew her compliment. She accepted the comment as flatter reflecting on herself. Yes, I suppose. Okay, he doesn't bite. He laughs. What else? Meg counted up her dropped stitch and began again. Knit, purl, purl. I said, I heard you, and it isn't that I don't want to tell you, but it's so difficult to remember. I don't dwell on these things, the way you seem to. They go out of my head, like a dream. I'm sure that's the normal attitude. It may be normal, darling, but I'd rather be natural. Holly paused in the process of reddening the rest of the cat's whiskers. Listen, if you can't remember, try leaving the lights on. Please understand me, Holly. I'm a very, very, very conventional person. Oh, balls. What's wrong with a decent look at the guy you like? Men are beautiful, a lot of them are. Joe's is. And if you don't even want to look at him, well, I'd say he's getting a pretty cold plate of macaroni. Lower your voice. You can possibly be in love with him now. Does that answer your question? No, because I'm not a cold plate of macaroni. I'm a warm-hearted person. That's the basis of my character. Okay, you've got a warm heart. But if I were a man on my way to bed, I'd rather take a long hot water bottle. It's more tangible. You won't hear any squirks of Joe's, she said complacently, her needles flashing in the sunlight. What's more, I am in love with him. Do you realize? I've knitted 10 pairs of argyles in less than 3 months. And this is the second sweater. She stretched the sweater and tossed it aside. What's the point, though? Sweaters in Brazil. I ought to be making sun helmets. Holly laid back, and yawned. It must be winter sometime. It rains. That I know. He'd jungles. Heat jungles. Actually, I'd like that. Better you than me. Yes, said Holly, with a sleepiness that was not sleepy. Better me than you. On Monday, when I went down for the morning mail, the card on Holly's box had been altered, a name added. Miss Golightly and Miss Wildwood were now traveling together. This might be held my interest longer, except for a letter in my own mailbox. It was from a small university review to whom I'd sent a story. They liked it, and thought I must understand they could not afford to pay. They intended to publish. Publish, that meant print. Desiree's excitement is no mere phrase. I had to tell someone, and talking the stairs two at a time, I pounded on Holly's door. I didn't trust my voice to tell the news. As soon as she came to the door, her eyes squintly with sleep. I thrust the letter at her. It seemed as though she'd had time to read 60 pages before she handed it back. I wouldn't let them do it. Not if they don't pay you, she said, yawning. Perhaps my face explained she's misconstructed. That I'd not wanted advice, but congratulations. Her mouth shifted from a yawn to a smile. Oh, I see. It's wonderful. Well, come in, she said. We'll make a pot of coffee and celebrate. Now I'll get dressed and take you to lunch. Her bedroom was consistent with her parlor. It perpetuated that same camping atmosphere. Crates and suitcases, everything packed and ready to go, like the belongings of a criminal who feels the law not far behind. In the parlor there was no conventional furniture, but the bedroom had the bed itself, a double one at that. A quiet, flashy, blonde wood, tufted satin. She left the door of the bathroom open and conversed from there. Between the flushing and the brushing, most of what she said was unintelligible, but the gist of it was, she's supposed to know Meg Wildwood had moved on, and wasn't that convenient, because if you're going to have a roommate and she isn't a dyke, then the next best thing is a perfect fool, which Meg was, because then you can dump the lease on them and send them out for the laundry. One could see that Holly had a laundry problem. The room was strewn, like the girls' gymnasium. And she's quite a successful model. Isn't that fantastic? But a good thing, she said, hopping out of the bathroom as she adjusted a garter. It ought to keep her out of my hair most of the day, and there shouldn't be too much trouble on the men front. She's engaged. Nice guy, too. Though there's a tiny difference in height. I'd say a foot. Her favor. Where the hell? She sat on her knees, poking under the bed. After she's found what she was looking for, a pair of lizard shoes, she had to search for a blouse, a belt, and it was a subject to ponder. How? From such wreckage, she evolved the eventful effect. Pampered, calmly immaculate, as though she'd been attended by Cleopatra's maids. She said, "Listen," and cupped her hand under my chin. "I'm glad about the story. Really, I am." That Monday, in October 1943, a beautiful day with the buoyancy of a bird, to start, we had Manhattans of Joe Bells. And when he heard of my good luck, champagne cocktails on the house. Later we wandered towards Fifth Avenue, where there was a parade. The flags in the wind, the thump of the military bands and military feet seemed to have nothing to do with the war, but to be rather a fanfare arranged in my personal honor. We ate lunch at the cafeteria in the park, afterwards avoiding the zoo. Holly said she couldn't bear to see anything in a cage. We giggled, ran, sang along. The path towards the old wooden bathhouse, now gone, leaves floated on the lake. On the shore, a parkman was fanning a bonfire of them, and the smoke, rising like Indian signals, was the only smudge on the quivering air. Aprils have never meant so much to me. Autumn seemed that season of beginning, spring, which is how I felt sitting with Holly on the railings of the boathouse porch. I thought of the future and spoke of the past because Holly wanted to know about my childhood. She talked of her own too, but it was elusive, nameless, placeless, and impressionistic ridicule, though the impression received was contrary to what one expected, for she gave an almost voluptuous account of swimming in summer, Christmas trees, pretty cousins and parties, in short, happy in a way that she was not, and never, certainly the background of a childhood had run away. Or, I asked, wasn't it true that she had been out on her own since she was 13? She rubbed her nose. That's true. The other isn't. But really, darling, you made such a tragedy out of your childhood I didn't feel I should compete. She hopped off a railing. Anyway, it reminds me, I ought to send Fred some peanut butter. The rest of the afternoon we were east and west warming out of the reluctant grocers cans of peanut butter, a warm-time scarcity. Dark came before we'd rounded up a half-dozen jars, the last as a delicatessen on 3rd Avenue. It was near the antique shop with the place of a bird cage in its window. So I took her there to see, and she enjoyed the point. It's fantasy, but still, it's a cage. Passing the Woolworth, she gripped my arm. Let's steal something, she said, pulling me into the store, where at once she seemed a pressure of ice, as though we were already under suspicion. Come on, don't be a chicken. She scouted a counter piled with paper pumpkins and Halloween masks. The saleslady was occupied with a group of nuns who were trying on masks. Holly picked up a mask and slipped it over her face. She chose another and put it on mine. Then she took my hand and we walked away. It was as simple as that. Outside we ran a few blocks, I think to make it more dramatic, but also because, as I'd discovered, successful theft accelerates. I wondered if she'd often stolen. I used to, she said. I mean, I had to, if I wanted anything. But I still do it every now and then, sort of to keep my hand in it. We wore the masks all the way home. I have a memory of spending many hither and yawning days with Holly. And it's true, we did at odd moments see a great deal of each other. But on the whole, the memory was false, because towards the end of the month I found a job. Where is there to add? The less the better, except to say it was necessary and lasted from 9 to 5, which made our hours, Holly's and I's, extremely different. Unless it was Thursday, her sing day, or unless she'd gone horseback riding in the park, as she did occasionally. Holly was hardly up when I came home, sometimes stopping there. I shared her wake-up coffee while she dressed for the evening. She was forever on her way out, not always with Rusty Trawler, but usually, and usually too, they were joined by Mag Wildwood, and the handsome Brazilian, whose name was Jos Libra-Jigger. His mother was German. As a quartet, they struck an unmusical note, primarily full of Yebra Jagger, who seemed out of place in their company as a violin in a jazz band. He was intelligent, he was presentable, he appeared to have a serious link with his work, which was obscurely governmental, vaguely important, and took him to Washington several days a week. How, then, could he survive night after night in La Rue El Monroco, listening to the Wildwood chatter and staring into Rusty's raw baby petticoat's face? Perhaps, like most of us in foreign country, he was incapable of placing people, selecting a frame for their picture, as he would at home. Therefore, all Americans had to be judged in a pretty equal light, and on this basis, his companions appeared to be tolerable examples of local color and national character. That would explain much. Holly's determination explains the rest. Late one afternoon, while waiting for a Fifth Avenue bus, I noticed a taxi stop across the street to let out a girl who ran up the steps of the 42nd Street Public Library. She was through the doors before I recognized her, which was pardonable, For Holly and libraries were not as easy an association to make. I let curiosity guide me between the lines, debating on the way whether I should admit following her or pretend a coincidence. In the end, I did neither, but concealed myself some tables away from her in the general reading room, where she sat behind her dark glasses and fortness of literature she'd gathered at the desk. She sped from one book to the next, intermittently lingering on a page, always a frown. As if it were printed upside down, she had a pencil poised above paper. Nothing seemed to catch her fancy. Still, now and then, as though for the hell of it, she made a laborious scribblings. Watched her. I remembered a girl I'd known in school. I grinned. Mildred Grossman. Mildred. With her moist hair and greasy spectacles. Her stained fingers that diseased frogged and carried coffee to picket lines. Her flat eyes that only turned towards the stars to estimate their chemical tonnage. Earth and air could not be more opposite than Mildred and Holly. Yet in my head, they acquired the Siamese twinship. And on the thread of a thought that had sewn them together ran like this. The average personality reshapes frequently. Every few years, even our bodies undergo a complete overhaul, desirable or not. It is a natural thing that we should change. All right, here were two people who never would. And that is what Mildred Grossman had in common with Holly Golightly. They would never change because they had been given their character too soon, which, like sudden riches, leads to a lack of proportion. The one had splurged herself into a top-heavy realist, and the other lopsided romantic. I imagined them in a restaurant of the future. Mildred still studying the menu for its nutritional values. Holly still gluttonous for everything on it. It would never be different. They would walk through life and out of it with the same determined step that looks small notice, and those cliffs at the left. Such profound observations made me forget where I was. I came to, startled to find myself in the gloom of the library, and surprised all over again to see Holly there. It was after 7. She was freshening her lipstick and perking up her appearance from what she deemed correct for a library to what, by adding a bit of scarf, some earrings, she considered suitable for the colony. When she'd left, I wandered over to the table where her books remained. They were what I had wanted to see. South by Thunderbird, Byways of Brazil, The Political Mind of Latin America, and so forth. On Christmas Eve, she and Meg gave a party. Holly asked me to come early and help them trim the tree. I'm still not sure how they maneuvered that tree into the apartment. The top branches were scrunched against the ceiling. The lower ones spread wall to wall. Altogether, it was not unlike the Yuletide giant we see in a Rockfester plaza. Moreover, it would have taken a Rockfester to decorate it, for it soaked up bubbles and tinsel like melting snow. Holly suggested she ran out to Woolworth's and steal some balloons. She did, and they turned the tree into a fairly good show. We made a toast to our work, and Holly said, "Look in the bedroom. There's a present for you." I had one for her, too. A small package in my pocket that felt even smaller when I saw, square on the bed and wrapped with a red ribbon, the beautiful birdcage. "But Holly, it's dreadful." I couldn't agree more, but I thought you wanted it. "The money, $350. She shrugged. "A few extra trips to the powder room. Promise me, though. Promise you'll never put a living thing in it." I started to kiss her, but she held out her hand. "Give me," she said, tapping the bulge in my pocket. "I'm afraid it isn't much." And it wasn't. A St. Christopher's medal. But at least it came from Tiffany's. Holly was not a girl who could keep anything. And surely by now she has lost that medal, left in a suitcase or some hotel drawer. But the birdcage is still mine. I've lugged it to New Orleans, Nantucket, all over the Europe, Morocco, the West Indies. Yet I seldom remember that it was Holly who gave it to me, because at one point I chose to forget. We had a big falling out, among the objects rotating in the eye of our hurricane, were the bird cage and O.G. Bearman and my story, a copy of which I'd given Holly when it appeared in the University Review. Sometime in February, Holly had gone on a winter trip with Rusty, Meg, and Joe's Libra Jigger. Our alteration happened soon after she returned. She was brown as iodine. Her hair was sun-bleached to a ghost color. She had a wonderful time. Well, first of all, we were in Key West, and Rusty got mad at some sailors for vice versa. Anyway, he'll have to wear a spine brace for the rest of his life. Dearest Meg ended up in the hospital too. First-degree sunburn, disgusting, all blisters, and citronella. We can stand the smell of her. Joe's and I left them in the hospital and went to Havana. He says wait till I see Rio. But as far as I'm concerned, Havana can take my money right now. We had an irresistible guide, most of him Negro, and the rest of him Chinese. And while I don't go much for one or the other, the combination was fairly riveting. So I let him play Neasy under the table because frankly I didn't find him at all banal. But then one night he took us to a blue movie. So what do you suppose? There he was on the screen. Of course we got back to Key West. Meg was positive I'd spent the whole time sleeping with Joe's. So was Rusty. But he doesn't care about that. He simply wants to hear the details. Actually, things were pretty tense until I had a heart-to-heart with Meg. We were in the front room, where I thought it was now nearly March. The enormous Christmas tree turned brown and scentless, its balloons shriveled as an old cow's dogs, still occupied most of the space. A reorganizable piece of furniture had been added to the room, an army coat. And Holly was trying to preserve her tropic look, was sprawled on it under a sun lamp. And you convinced her? That I hadn't slept with Joe's? God, yes, I simply told. But made it sound like agonized confession. Simply told her I was a dyke. She couldn't have believed that. The hell she didn't. What do you think she went out and bought this army coat? Believe it to me, I'm always top banana in the shook department. Be a darling. Rub some oil on my back. While I was performing the service, she said, O.G. Bearman's in town. And listen, I gave him your story in the magazine. He was quite impressed. He thinks maybe you're worth helping, but he says you're on the wrong track. Negroes and children. Who cares? Not Mr. Bearman, I gather. Well, I agree with him. I read that story twice. Brats and niggers. Trembling leaves. Description. It doesn't mean anything. My hand smoothing oil on her skin seemed to have a temper of its own. It yearned to raise itself, come down on her buttocks. Give me an example, I said quietly, of something that means something, in your opinion. Wuthering Heights, she said, without hesitation. The urge in my hand was growing, beyond control. But that's unreasonable. You're talking about a work of genius. It was, wasn't it? My wild, sweet Kathy. God, I cried buckets. And saw it 10 times. I said, oh, with recognizable relief. Oh, with a shameful rising infection. The movie. Her muscles hardened. The touch of her was like stone warmed by the sun. Everybody has to feel superior to somebody, she said. But it's customary to present a little proof before you take the privilege. I don't compare myself to you or Berman. Therefore, I can't feel superior. We want different things. Don't you want to make money? I haven't planned that far. That's how your stories sound, as though you'd written them without knowing the end. Well, I'll tell you. You'd better make money. You have an expensive imagination. Not many people are going to buy you bird cages. Sorry. You will be if you hit me. You wanted to a minute ago. I could feel it in your hand. And you want to now. I did, terribly. My heart was shaking as I recapped the bottle of oil. Oh no, I wouldn't regret that. I'm only sorry you wasted your money on me. Rusty Trawler is too hard a way of earning it. She sat up on the army coat, her face, her naked breasts, coldly blue in the sun lamp light. It should take you about 4 seconds to walk from here to the door. I'll give you 2. I went straight upstairs. She got the bird cage, took it down, and left it in front of her door. That settled that. Or so I imagined, until the next morning when I was leaving for work. I saw the cage perched on a sidewalk, ashcan, waiting for the garbage collector. Rather sheepishly, I rescued it and carried it back to my room. A capitulation that did not lessen my resolve to put Holly Golightly absolutely out of my life. She was, I decided, a crude exhibitionist, a time-waster, an utter fake, someone never to be spoken to again. And I didn't. Not for a long while. We passed each other on the stairs with lowered eyes. If she walked into Joe Bell's, I walked out. At one point, Madame Sophia Spinella, the collatura, the roller skating enthusiast who lived on the first floor, circulated a petition amongst the brownstones, other tenants asking them to join her in having Miss Golightly evicted. She was, said Madame Spinella, morally objectionable, and the perpetrator of all night gatherings that endanger the safety and sanity of her neighbors. Though I refused to sign, secretly I felt Madame Spinella had a cause to complain, but her petition failed. And as April approached May, the open-windowed, warm spring nights were lurid with the party sounds, the loud playing gramophone, and martini laughter that emanated from April too. It was no novelty to encounter suspicious specimens among Holly's callers. Quite the contrary. But one day late that spring, while passing through the brownstones' vestibule, I noticed a very provocative man examining her mailbox. A person in his early 50s with a hard, weathered face, gray, forlorn eyes. He wore an old, sweat-stained gray hat and his cheap summer suit. A pale blue hung too loosely on his lanky frame. His shoes were brown and brand new. He seemed to have no intention of ringing Holly's bell, slowly as though he were reading Braille. He kept rubbing a finger across the embossed lettering of her name. That evening, on my way to supper, I saw the man again. He was standing across the street, leaning against a tree and staring up at Holly's windows. Sinister speculations rushed through my head. Was he a detective? Or some underworld agent connected with her Sing Sin friend, Sally Tomato? The situation revived my tender feelings for Holly. It was only fair to interrupt our feud long enough to warn her that she was being watched. As I walked to the corner, heading east towards Hamburg Haven at 79th and Madison, I could feel the man's attention focused on me. Presently, without turning my head, I knew that he was following me, because I could hear him whistling. Not any ordinary tune, but the plaintive, prairie melody Holly sometimes played on her guitar. Don't wanna sleep, don't wanna die, just wanna go a-traveling through the pastures of the sky. The whistling continued across Park Avenue and up Madison. Once, while waiting for a traffic light to change, I watched him out of the corner of my eye as he stooped to pet Sleazy Pomeranian. "That's a fine animal you got there," he told the owner in a hoarse, countrified drawl. Hamburg Haven was empty. Nevertheless, he took a seat right beside me at the long counter. He smelled of tobacco and sweat. He ordered a cup of coffee. But when it came, he didn't touch it. Instead, he chewed on a toothpick and studied me in the wall mirror facing us. "Excuse me," I said, speaking to him via the mirror. "But what do you want?" The question didn't embarrass him. He seemed relieved to have had it asked. "Son," he said, "I need a friend." He brought out a wallet. It was as worn as his leathery hands, almost falling to pieces. And so was the brittle, cracked, blurred snapshot he handed me. There were 7 people in the picture, all grouped together, on the sagging porch of a stark wooden house, and all children except for the man himself, who had his arm around the waist of the plump blonde little girl with a hand shading her eyes against the sun. "That's me," he said, pointing at himself. "That's her," he tapped the plump girl. "And this one over here," he added, indicating a tow-headed beanpole, "that's her brother Fred." I looked at her again, and yes, now I could see it. An embryonic resemblance to Holly in the squinting, fat-cheeked child. At the same moment, I realized who the man must be. "You're Holly's father." He blinked, he frowned. "Her name's not Holly. She was a Lulamie Barnes." "Was," he said, shifting the toothpick in his mouth, "till she married me. I'm her husband. Dog Golightly. I'm a horse doctor, animal man. Do some farming too, near Tulip, Texas. Son, why are you laughing?" It wasn't real laughter. It was nerves. I took a swallow of water and choked. He pounded me on the back. There's no humorous matter, son. I'm a tired man. I've been 5 years looking for my woman. Soon as I got that letter from Fred, saying where she was, I bought myself a ticket to Greyhound. LeMay belongs home with her husband and her curran. Children? Them's her curran, he said, almost shouted. He meant the 4 other young faces in the picture, 2 barefoot girls and a pair of overalled boys. Well, of course, the man was deranged, but Holly can't be the mother of those children. They're older than she is, bigger. Now, son, he said a reasoning voice, I didn't claim that was her natural-born children. Their own precious mother, precious woman, Jesus rest her soul, she passed away 4th July, Independence Day, 1936. The year of the drought. When I married Lulamie, that was in December 1938. She was going on 14. Maybe an ordinary person, being only 14, wouldn't know their right mind, but you take Lulamie. She was an exceptional woman. She knew good and well what she was doing. When she promised to be my wife and the mother of my children, she plain broke our hearts when she ran off like she done. He sipped his cold coffee and glanced at me with a searching earnestness. Now, son, do you doubt me? Do you believe what I'm saying is so? I did. It was too impossible not to be a fact. Moreover, dovetailed with O.G. Behrman's description of the Hollies he had first encountered in California. You don't know whether she's a hillbilly or an Okie or what. Behrman couldn't be blamed for not guessing that she was a child wife from Tulip, Texas. Plain broke our hearts when she ran off like she done. The horse doctor repeated. She had no cause. All the housework was done by her daughters. Lulamie could just take it easy. Fuss in front of the mirrors and wash her hair. Our own cows, our own garden, chickens, pigs. Son, that woman got positively fat, while her brother groaned into a giant, which is a sight different from how they came to us. 'Twas Nellie, my oldest daughter. 'Twas Nellie brought 'em into the house. She came to me one morning, said, "Papa, I got 2 wild young guns locked in the kitchen. I caught 'em outside stealing milk and turkey eggs." That was Lula May and Fred. Well, you never saw a more pitiful something. Ribs sticking out everywhere, legs so puny, can't hardly stand. Teeth wobbling so bad they can't chew mush. Story was, their mother died of the TB and their papa done the same. All the children, a whole raft of them, they had been sent off to live with different mean people. Now Lula May and her brother, them two, been living with some mean, cow-count people 100 miles east of Tulip. She had good cause to run off from that house. She didn't have none to leave mine. 'Twas her home. He leaned his elbows on the counter and pressing his closed eyes with his fingertips sighted. She plumped out to be a real pretty woman, lively too, talky, a jaybird, with something smart to say in every subject, better than the radio. First thing you know, I'm out picking flowers. I tamed her crow and taught it how to say her name. I showed her how to play the guitar. Just to look at her made the tears spring to my eyes. The night I proposed, I cried like a baby. She said, "What you want to cry for, Doc? Of course we'll be married. I've never been married before." Well, I had to laugh, hug and squeeze her. "Never been married before?" He chuckled, chewed on his toothpick a moment. "Don't tell me that woman wasn't happy," he said, challengingly. "We all doted on her. She didn't have to lift a finger. Kept to eat a piece of pie, kept to comb her hair and send away for all the magazines. We must have had $100 worth of magazines come into that house. Ask me. That's what done it. Look at the show of pictures. Reading dreams. That's what started her walking down the road. Every day she'd walk a little further, a mile, and come home, 2 miles and come home. One day she just kept on." He put his hands over his eyes again. His breathing made a ragged noise. "The crow I gave her went wild and flew away. All summer you could hear him, in the yard, in the garden, in the woods. All summer that damned bird was calling, 'Lula May, Lula May.' He stayed hunched over and silent, as though listening to the long-ago summer sound. I carried out our checks to a cashier. While I was paying, he joined me. We left together and walked over to the Park Avenue. It was a cool, blowy evening. Swanky evening flapped in the breeze. The quietness between us continued until I said, "But what about her brother? He didn't leave?" "No, sir," he said, clearing his throat. "Fred was with us all right till they took him with the army. A fine boy, fine with horses. He didn't know what got into Lula May. How come she left her brother and husband and children? After he was in the army, though, Fred started hearing from her. The other day he wrote me her address, so I come to get her. I know she's sorry for what she's done. I know she wants to go home. He seemed to be asking me to agree with him. I told him that I thought he'd find Holly, or Lula May, somewhat changed. 'Listen, son,' he said. As we reached the steps of the brownstone, 'I advised you. I need a friend, because I don't want to surprise her, scare her none. That's why I've held off. Be my friend. Let her know I'm here.' The notion of introducing Miss Golightly to her husband had its satisfying aspects, and glancing up at her lighted windows, I hoped her friends were there, for the prospect of watching the Texans shake hands with Meg and Rusty and Joe's was more satisfying still. But Doc Golightly's proud, earnest eyes and sweet-stained had made me ashamed of such anticipations. He followed me into the house and prepared to wait at the bottom of the stairs. 'Do I look nice?' he whispered, brushing his sleeves, tightening the knot of his tie. Holly was alone. She answered the door at once. In fact, she was on her way out. White satin dancing plums and quantities of perfume announced gala intentions. "Well, idiot," she said playfully, slapped me with her purse. "I'm in too much for a hurry to make up now. We'll smoke the pipe tomorrow, okay?" "Sure, Lula-May, if you're still around tomorrow." She took off her dark glasses and squinted at me. It was as though her eyes were shattered prims, the dots of blue and green like broken bits of sparkle. "He told you that," she said in a small, shivering voice. "Oh, please, where is he?" She ran past me into the hall. "Fred." She called down the stairs. "Fred, where are you, darling?" I could hear Doc Golightly's footsteps climbing the stairs. His head appeared above the banisters, and Holly backed away from him, not as though she were frightened, but as though she were retreating into a shell of disappointment. Then he was standing in front of her, hand-dog and shy. "Gosh, little May," he began and hesitated, for Holly was gazing at him vacantly, as though she couldn't place him. "Gee, honey," he said, Don't they fit you up here? You're so skinny, like when I first saw you, all wild around the eye." Holly touched his face. Her fingers tested the reality of his chin, his beard stubble. "Hello, Doc," she said gently and kissed him on the cheek. "Hello, Doc," she repeated happily, and he lifted her off her feet in a rib-crushing grip. Whoops of relieved laughter shook him. "Gosh, little May, kingdom come." Neither of them noticed me when I squeezed past them and I went up to my room, nor did they seem aware of Madame Sophia Spinella, who opened her door and yelled, "Shut up! It's a disgrace. Do your whoring elsewhere." Divorce him? Of course I never divorced him. I was only 14, for God's sake. It couldn't have been legal. Holly tapped an empty martini glass. "Two more, my darling, Mr. Bell." Joe Bell, in whose bar we were sitting, accepted the older reluctancy. "You're rocking the boat kind of early," he complained, crunching on a Tums. It was not yet noon. According to the black mahogany clock behind the bar, it already served us 3 rounds. "But it's Sunday, Mr. Bull." "Clocks are slower on Sundays. Besides, I haven't been to bed yet," she told him and confided to me. "Not to sleep," she blushed and glanced away guiltfully. Not the first time since I'd known her, she seemed to feel a need to justify herself. "Well, I had to. Doc really loves me, you know. And I love him. He may have looked old and tacky to you, but you don't know the sweetness of him. The confidence he can give to birds and brats and fragile things like that. Anyone who ever gave you confidence, you owe them a lot. I've always remembered Doc in my prayers." "Please stop smirking," she demanded, stepping out a cigarette. "I do say my prayers." "I'm not smirking, I'm smiling. You're the most amazing person." "I suppose I am," she said, and her face, one rather bruised looking in the morning light, brightened. She smoothed her tousled hair, and the colors of the glimmered like a shampoo advertisement. "I must look fierce, but who wouldn't?" We spent the rest of the night roaming around in a bus station, right up till the last minute. Doc thought I was going to go with him, even though I kept telling him, "But Doc, I'm not 14 anymore, and I'm not Lula-May." But the terrible part is, and I realized it while we were standing there, I am. I'm still stealing turkey eggs and running through a barrier patch. Only now I call it having the mean reds. Joe Bell disdainfully settled the fresh martinis in front of us. "Never love a wild thing," Mr. Bell wholly advised him. That was Doc's mistake. He was always lugging home wild things, a hawk with a hurt wing. One time it was a full-grown bobcat with a broken leg. But you can give your heart to a wild thing. The more you do, the stronger they get, until they're strong enough to run into the woods, or fly into a tree, then a taller tree, then the sky. That's how you'll end up, Mr. Bell. If you let yourself love a wild thing, you'll end up looking at the sky." "She's drunk," Joe Bell informed me. "Moderately," Holly confessed, But Doc knew what I meant. I explained it to him very carefully, and it was something he could understand. We shook hands and held on to each other, and he wished me luck. She glanced at the clock. He must be in the Blue Mountains by now. What's she talking about? Joe Bell asked me. Holly lifted her martini. Let's wish the dog luck, too, she said, touching her glass against mine. Good luck, and believe me, dearest dog, it's better to look at the sky than live there. Such an empty place. So vague, just a country where the thunder goes and things disappear. Trawler breathed fifths. I was on a subway somewhere in Brooklyn when I saw that headline. The paper that bannered it belonged to another passenger. The only part of the text that I could see read, Rutherford Rusty Trawler, the millionaire playboy often accused of pro-Nazi sympathies, eloped to Greenwich yesterday with a beautiful. Not that I wanted to read any more. Holly had married him. Well, I wished I were under the wheels of the train. But I'd been wishing that before I spotted the headline, for a headful of reasons, I hadn't seen Holly, not really, since our drunken Sunday at Joe Bell's bar. The intervening weeks had given me my own case of the mean Reds. First off, I'd been fired from my job, deservedly, and for an amusing misdemeanor too complicated to recount here. Also, my draft board was displaying an uncomfortable interest, and having so recently escaped the regimentation of a small town, the idea of entering another form of diacalypse life made me desperate. Between the uncertainty of my draft status and a lack of specific experience, I couldn't seem to find another job. That was what I was doing on a subway in Brooklyn, returning from a discouraging interview with an editor of the now defunct newspaper, PM. All this, combined with the city of the summer, had reduced me to a taste of nervous interia. So I more than half meant it when I wished I were under the wheels of the train. The headline made the desire quite positive. If Holly could marry that absurd foetus, then the army of wrongness in the world might as well march over me. Or, and the question is apparent, was my outrage a little the result of being in love with Holly myself? A little. For I was in love with her, just as I'd once been in love with my mother's elderly colored cook, and a postman who let me follow him on his rounds, and a whole family named McKendrake. That category of love generates jealousy too. When I reached my station, I brought a paper, and reading the tail end of that sentence discovered that Rusty's bride was a beautiful cover girl from the Arkansas hills, Miss Margaret Thatcher, Fishu Wildwood. Mag! My legs went to limp with relief. I took a taxi the rest of the way home. Madame Sophia Spinella met me in the hall, wild-eyed, and wringing her hands. Run, she said. Bring the police. She's killing somebody. Somebody's killing her. It sounded like it, as though tigers were loose in Holly's apartment, a riot of crashing glasses, of rippings and fallings and overturned furniture. But there were no quarreling voices inside the uproar, which made it seem unnatural. Run! Shrieked Madame Spinella, pushing me. Tell the police murder! I ran, but only upstairs to Holly's room. Pounding on it had one result. The racket subsided, stopped altogether. But pleadings to let me in went unanswered, and my efforts to break down the door merely culminated in a bruised shoulder. Then below I heard Madame Spinella commanding some newcomer to go for the police. Shut up, she was told, and get out of my way. It was Jose Yabra Jagar, looking not at all the smart Brazilian diplomat, but sweaty and frightened. He ordered me out of his way too, and using his own key opened the door. I'm here, Dr. Goldman, he said, be knocking to a man accompanying him. Since no one prevented me, I followed him into the apartment, which was tremendously wrecked. At last the Christmas tree had been dismantled, very literally. Its brown dry branches sprawled in a welter of torn-up books, broken lamps, and gramophone records. Even the icebox had been emptied. Its contents tossed around the room. Raw eggs were sliding down the walks, and in the mouths of the debris, Holly's co-named cat was calmly licking the puddle of milk. In the bedroom, the smell of smashed perfume bottles made me gag. I stepped on Holly's dark glasses. They were laying on the floor, the lenses already shattered, the frames crackled in half. Perhaps that is why Holly's rigid figure on the bed stared at Joseph so blindly, seemed not to see the doctor, who, testing her pulse, crooned, "You're a tired young lady, very tired. You want to go to sleep, don't you?" Sleep. Holly rubbed her forehead, leaving a smear of blood from a cut finger. "Sleep," she said, and whispered like an exhausted, fretful child. "He is the only one would ever let me hug him in cold nights. I saw a place in Mexico with horses by the sea, labeled the doctor, selecting from his black case a hypodermic." Jones averted his face, quaintly, at the sight of needle. "Her sickness is only grief?" he asked, his difficult English lending the question an unintended irony. "She's grieving only?" "Didn't hurt a bit, now did it?" inquired the doctor, smugly dabbing Holly's arm with a scrap of cotton. She came to sufficiently focus on the doctor. "Everything hurts. Where are my glasses?" But she didn't need them. Her glasses were closing of their own accord. "She's only grieving?" insisted Josie. "Please, sir," the doctor was quite short with him, "if you leave me alone with the patient." Jones withdrew to the front room, where he released his temper, and on the snooping, tiptoeing presence of Madame Spinella. "Don't touch me, I'll call the police," she threatened, as he whipped her to the door with Portuguese oaths. He considered throwing me out too, or so I surmised from his expression. Instead, he invited me to have a drink. The only unbroken bottle we could find contained dry vermouth. "I have a worry," he confided. "I have a worry that this should cause a scandal. Her crashing everything, conducting like a crazy. I must have no public scandal. It's too delicate, my name, my work." He seemed cheered to learn that I saw no reason for a scandal. Demolishing one's possessions was presumably a private affair. "It's only a question of grieving," he firmly declared. When the sadness came, first she throws a drink. She's drinking, the bottle, those books, a lamp. Then I'm scared. I hurried to bring a doctor. But why, I wanted to know. Why should she have a fit over Rusty? If I were her, I would celebrate. Rusty? I was still carrying my newspaper, and I showed him a headline. "Oh, that," he grinned rather scornfully. "They do us a grand favor, Rusty and Meg. We laugh over it. How they think they break our hearts when all the time we want them to run away. I assure you, we were laughing when the sadness came." His eyes searched the litter on the floor. He picked up a ball of yellow paper. "This," he said. It was a telegram from Tulip, Texas. "Received notice. Young friend killed in action overseas. Stop your husband and children join in the sorrow of our mutual loss. Stop letter follows love Doc." Holly never mentioned her brother again, except once. Moreover, she stopped calling me Fred. June, July, all through the warm month, she hibernated like a winter animal who did not know spring had come and gone. Her hair darkened. She put on weight. She became rather careless about her clothes. Used to rush round to the delicatessen in morning. a rain slicker and nothing underneath. Joe's moved into the apartment, his name replacing Meg Wildwood's on the mailbox still. Holly was a good deal alone, for Joe's stay in Washington 3 days a week. During his absence, she entertained no one and seldom left the apartment, except on Thursdays when she made her weekly trip to Ossining. Which is not to imply that she had lost interest in life. Far from it. She seemed more content, altogether happier than I'd ever seen her. A keen, sudden, unholy-like enthusiasm for homemaking resulted in several unholy-like purchases. At a Parker Barnett auction, she acquired a stag at bay hunting tapestry, and from the William Randolph Hearst estate, a gloomy pair of Gothic easy chairs. She bought the complete modern library shelves of classical records, innumerable Metropolitan Museum reproductions, including a statue of Chinese cat that her own cat hated and hissed at, and ultimately broke. A warning mixer and pressure cooker and a library of cookbooks. She spent whole half her afternoon slopping about in a sweatbox of her midget kitchen. Joe says I'm better than the colony. Really, who would have dreamed I had such a great natural talent? A month ago, I couldn't scramble eggs, and still couldn't for that matter. Simple dishes, steak, a proper salad were beyond her. Instead, she fed Rose, and occasionally myself, a tray soups. Brandied black terrapin poured into avocado shells. Narrow-ish novelties, roasted pleasant stuffed with pomegranates and persimmons, and other dubious inventions, chicken and saffron rice served with a chocolate sauce, an East Indian classic, my dear. Worm, thyme, sugar, and cream rationing restricted her imagination when it came to sweets. Nevertheless, she once managed something called tobacco tapioca. Best not describe it. Nor describe her attempts to master Portuguese. An ordeal as tedious to me as it was to her, for whenever I visited her, an album of linguist phone records never ceased rotating on the phonograph. Now, too, she rarely spoke a sentence that did not begin after we were married, or when we moved to Rio. Yet Joe has never suggested marriage, she admitted it. But after all, he knows I'm preggers. Well, I am, darling, 6 weeks gone. I don't see why that should surprise you. It didn't me. Not who beat. I'm delighted. I want to have at least 9. I'm sure some of them will have some of them will be rather dark. Joe's has a touch of legendre, I suppose. Who guessed that? Which is fine by me. What could be prettier than a quiet, coolie baby with bright, green, beautiful eyes? I wish please don't love, but I wish I'd been a virgin for him, for Joe's. Not that I've warned the multitudes, some people say. I don't blame the bastards for saying it. I've always thrown out such a jazzy line. Really, though, I towed it up the other night, and I've only had 11 lovers, not counting anything that happened before I was 13, because after all, that just doesn't count. 11. Does that make me a whore? Look at Meg Wildwood, or Honey Tucker, or Rose Ellen Ward. They've all had the old Calippo hands. So many times, it amounts to applause. Of course, I haven't anything against whores, except this. Some of them may have an honest tongue, but they all have dishonest hearts. I mean, you can't bang the guy and cash his checks and at least not try to believe you love him. I never have. Even Benny Chiclet and all those rodents. I sort of hypnotized myself into thinking their sheer wretchedness had a certain allure. Actually, except for Doc, if you want to count Doc, Jaws is my first non-rat romance. Oh, he's not my idea of the absolute finito. He tells little lies, and he worries what people think, and he talks about 50 baths a day. Men ought to smell somewhat. He's too prim, too cautious to be my guy ideal. He always turns his back to get undressed, and he makes too much noise when he eats, and I don't like to see him run because there's something funny looking about him when he runs. If I were free to choose from everybody's alive, just snap my fingers and say, "Come here, you," I wouldn't pick Joe's. Nehu, he's nearer the mark. Wendell Wilkie. I'd settle for Garbo any day. Why not? A person ought to be able to marry a man or a woman, or listen. If you come to me and said you wanted to hilch up with man o' war, I'd respect your feeling. No, I'm serious. Love should be allowed. I'm all for it. Now that I've got a pretty good idea what it is. Because I do love Joe's. I'd stop smoking if he asked me to. He's friendly. He can laugh me out of the mean rats. Only I don't have them much anymore. Except sometimes, and even then they're not so hidoala that I gulp, signal, or have to haul myself to Tiffany's. I take his suit to the cleaner, or stuff some mushrooms, and I feel fine, just great. Another thing, I've thrown away my horoscopes. I must have spent $1 on every goddamn star, the goddamn planetarium. It's a bore, but the answer is good things only happen to you if you're good. Good? Honest is more what I mean. Not law type honest. I'd rob a grave. I'd steal 2 bites off a dead man's eyes if I thought it would contribute to my day's enjoyment. But unto thyself typed honest. Be anything but a coward, a pretender, an emotional crook, a whore. I'd rather have cancer than a dishonest heart, which isn't being pious. Just practical. Cancer may cool you, but the other's sure too. Oh, screw it, Cookie. Hand me my guitar. I'll sing you a fada in the most perfect Portuguese. Those final weeks planning the end of summer and the beginning of another autumn are blurred in memory, perhaps because our understanding of each other had reached that sweet depths where two people communicate more often in silence than in words. Affectionate quietness replaces the tensions, the unrelaxed chatter and chasing about that produce a friendship more showy, more in the surface sense. Dramatic moments. Frequently, when he was out of town, I've developed hostile attitudes towards him and seldom used his name. We spent entire evenings together during which we exchanged less than 100 words. Once we walked all the way to Chinatown, ate coal-mine supper, brought some pepper lanterns, and stole a box of jaw stickers, then moised across the Brooklyn Bridge. And on the bridge, as we watched seaward moving ships pass between the cliffs' burning skyline, she said, "Years from now, years and years, one of those ships will bring me back. Me and my 9 Brazilian brats, because yes, they must see this. These lies the river. I love New York, even though it isn't mine. The way something has to be. A tree, or a street, or a house. Something anyway that belongs to me because I belong to it." And I said, "Do shut up." For I felt infuriatingly left out. A tugboat and dry dock while she, glittery voyager of secure destination, steamed down the harbor with whistling and confetting in the air. So the last days blow about them in memory, hazy, autumnal, all alike as leaves. Until a day unlike any other I've lived. It happened to fall on the 30th December, my birthday. A fact which had no effect on events, except that, expecting from some form of monetary resemblance from my family, I was eager for a postman's morning visit. Indeed, I went downstairs, and I waited for him. If I had not been loitering in the vestibule, then Holly would not have asked me to go horseback riding, and would not consequently have had the opportunity to save my life. "Come on," she said. when she found and awaiting the postman. Let's walk a couple of horses around the park. She was wearing a windbreaker and a pair of blue jeans and tennis shoes. She slapped her stomach, drawing attention to its flatness. Don't think I'm out to lose her hair. But there's a horse, my darling, old Mabel Raverna. I can't go without saying goodbye to Mabel Raverna. Goodbye? A week from Saturday. Joe's brought the tickets. In rather a trance, I let her lead me down to the street. We changed plans to Miami, then over the sea, over the Andes. Taxi. Over the Andes? As we rode in a cab across Central Park, it seemed to me as though I, too, were flying, desolately floating, over the snow-peaked and perilous territory. But you can't. After all, what about, you can't really run off and leave everybody. I don't think anyone will miss me. I have no friends. I will miss you. So will Joe Bell. And millions, like Sally. Poor Mr. Tomato. I loved old Sally. She sat and sighed it. You know I haven't been to see him in a month. When I told him I was going away, he was an angel. Actually, she frowned. He seemed delighted that I was leaving the country. He said it was all for the best, because sooner or later there might be trouble if they found out I wasn't his real niece. That far lawyer, jocosely, sent me $500 in case a wedding present from Sally. I wanted to be unkind. You can expect a present from me too. When and if the wedding happens, she laughed. He'll marry me all right, in church, and with his family there. That's why we're waiting till we get to Rio. Does he know you're married already? What's the matter with you? Are you trying to ruin my day? It's a beautiful day. Leave it alone. But it's perfectly possible. It isn't possible. I've told you that wasn't legal. It couldn't be. She rubbed her nose and glanced at me sideways. Mention that to a living soul, darling. I'll hang you by your toes and dress you for a hog. The stables, I believe they have been replaced by television studios, were on West 66th Street. Holly selected me an old swayback black and white mare. Don't worry, she's safer than a cradle, which in my case was a necessary guarantee for 10-cent pony rides at childhood carnivals, where the limit of my equestrian experience. Holly helped hoist me into the saddle, then mourned her own horse, and to every animal that took the lead as we jogged across the traffic of Central Park, west and entered a riding path dabbed with leaves, dangling breathless about. See, she shouted, it's great! And suddenly it was. Suddenly, watching the tangled colors of Holly's hair flash in the red-yellow leaf light, I loved her enough to forget myself, my self-pitying despairs, and to be content that something she thought happy was going to happen. Very gently, the horses began to trot. Waves of wind splashed us, spanked our faces. We plunged in and out of the sun and shadow pools, and joy, a glad-to-believe alive exhilaration, jolted through me like a jigger of nitrogen. That was 1 minute. The next introduced farce in grim disguise. For all at once, like savage members of a jungle ambush, a band of Negro boys leaped out of the shrubbery along the path. Hooting, cursing, they launched rocks and harnessed the horses' trumps with switches. Mine, the black and white mare, rose on her hind legs, wind-teared, like the tightrope artist, then flew straight down the path, bouncing my feet out of the stirrups and leaving me scarcely attached. Her hooves made the gravel stones spit sparkles, the sky current. Trees, a lake with little boy sailboats, statues went by lickety-split. Nursemaids rushed to rescue their charges from our awesome approach. Men, bums, and others yelled, pull in the reins, and whoa, boy, whoa, and jump. And only was later that I remembered these voices. At the time, I was simply conscious of Holly, the cowboy sound of her racing behind me, never quite catching up, and over calling encouragement. Onward, across the park, out into the Fifth Avenue, stampeding against the no-day traffic taxis, buses that screechingly soared. Past the Duke Mansion, the Frick Museum, past the Fears and the Plaza. But Holly gained ground. Moreover, a mounted policeman had joined the chase, flanking my runaway mare, one on either side. Their horses performed a pincer movement that brought her to a steamy halt, and it was then at last that I fell off her back, fell off and picked myself up and stood there, not altogether certain where I was. A crowd gathered. The policeman huffed and wrote in a book. Presently, he was the most sympathetic, grinned, and said he would arrange for our horses to be returned to their stables. Holly put us in a taxi. Darling, how do you feel? Fine. But you haven't any pulse, she said, feeling my wrist. Then I must be dead. No, idiot. This is serious. Look at me. The trouble was, I couldn't see her. Rather, I saw several Hollys, a trio of sweaty faces so white with concern that I was both touched and embarrassed honestly. I don't feel anything, except ashamed. Please, are you sure? Tell me the truth. You might have been killed, but I wasn't, and thank you for saving my life. You're wonderful, unique. I love you. Damn fool. She kissed me on the cheek. Then there were 4 of her, and I fainted dead anyway. That evening, photographs of Holly were front-paged in the latest edition of the Journal American, and by the early editions of both the Daily News and the Daily Mirror. The publicity had nothing to do with the runaway horses. It concerned quite another matter. As the headlines revealed, Playgirl arrested in a narcoholic scandal, Journal American. Arrest dope smuggling actress, Daily News. Drug ring exposed, glamour girl held, Daily Mirror. Off the lot, the news printed the most striking pictures. Holly entering police headquarters, wedged between 2 muscular detectives, 1 male, 1 female. In this squalid context, even her clothes, she was still wearing the riding costume, windbreaker, and blue jeans, suggested a gang mole hooligan. An impression dark glasses, disarrayed coiffure, and a picayune cigarette dangling from swelling lips did not diminish. The caption read, 20 years old, Holly Golightly, beautiful movie starlet and cafe society celebrity. DA alleges to be key figure in international drug smuggling racket linked to Rexter Salvatore Sally Tomato. That's Patrick Connor and Shileb Fazzatoni, L&R, are shown escorting her into the 67th ST precinct. See story on page 3. The story featuring a photograph of a man identified as Oliver Father O'Shuxley, shielding his face with a fedora. Ran 3 full columns, here somewhat condensed, are the pertinent paragraphs. Members of Cafe Society were stunned today by the arrest of gorgeous Holly Golightly, 20 years old Hollywood starlet and highly publicized girl about New York. At the same time, 2 p.m., police nabbed Oliver O'Shaughnessy, 52, of the Hotel Seaboard, W 49th Street, as he exited from a Hamburg Heaven on Madison Avenue. Both are alleged to be District Attorney Frank L. Donovan, to be important figures of an international drug ring dominated by the notorious mafia Führer Salvatore Sally Tomato, currently in Sing Sing serving a 5-year rap political bribery. O'Shaughnessy, a defrocked priest, variously known in crimeland circles as Father and the Padre, has a history of arrests dating back to 1934, when he served 2 years for operating a phony Rhode Island mental institution. The monastery. Miss Golightly, who has no previous criminal records, was arrested in her luxurious apartment at a Swank East Side address. Although the DA's office has issued no formal statement, responsible sources insist the blonde and beautiful actress, not long ago the constant companion of multimillionaire Rothford Troller, has been acting as liaison between the imprisoned Tomato and his chief lieutenant O'Shaughnessy. Posing as a relative of Tomato's, Miss Golightly is said to have paid weekly visits to Sing Sing. And on these occasions, Tomato supplied her with verbally coded messages, which she then transmitted to O'Shaughnessy. Via this link, Tomato, believed to have been born in Cefalù, Sicily, in 1874, was able to keep first-hand control of the worldwide narcotics syndicate, with outposts in Mexico, Cuba, Sicily, Tangier, Turham, and Dakar. But the DA's office refused to offer any detail on these allegations or even verify them. Tipped off, a large number of reporters were on hand to the E67th St. Precinct station, where the accused pair arrived for booking. O'Shaughnessy, a burly red-haired man, refused comment and kicked one cameraman in the groin. But Miss Golightly, fragile, eyeful, even though attired like a tomboy in slacks and leather jacket, appealed relatively unconcerned. "Don't ask me what the hell this is about," she told reporters. "Raskeku je ne sis par mes chers, because I do not know, my dears. Yes, I have visited Sally Tomato. I used to go to see him every week. What's wrong with that? He believes in God, and so do I." Then, under the subheading admits own drug addiction, Miss Golightly smiled when a reporter asked whether or not she herself is a narcotics user. "I've had a little go at a marijuana, but it's not half so destructive as brandy. Cheaper, too. Unfortunately, I prefer brandy. No, Mr. Tomato never mentioned drugs to me. It makes me furious. The way those wretched people keep persecuting him. He's a sensitive, a religious man, a darling old man." There is one especially gross error in this report. She was not arrested in her luxurious apartment. It took place in my own bathroom. I was soaking away my horse-ride pains in a tub of scalding water laced with Epsom salts. Holly, an attentive nurse, was sitting on the edge of the tub, waiting to rub me with Sloane's liniment and tuck me into bed. There was a knock at the front door, and as the door was unlocked, Holly called, "Come in." It came Madame Sophia Spinella, trained by a pair of civilian-clothes detectives. One of them, a lady with thick yellow braids roped around her head. "Here she is, the wanted woman," boomed Madame Spinella, invading the bathroom and leveling a finger. First at Holly, then my nakedness. "Look, what a whore she is!" The male detective seemed embarrassed by Madame Spinella and by the situation. But a harsh enjoyment tensed the face of his companion. She plumped a hand on Holly's shoulder and, in a surprising baby-child voice, said, "Come along, sister. You're going places." Whereupon Holly coolly told her, "Get them cotton-picking hands off of me, you dreary, driving old baldyke," which rather enraged the lady. She slapped Holly damned hard. So hard her hand had twisted on her neck, and the bottle of liniment flung from her hand, smothered on the tile floor, where I, scampering out of the tub in which the fray, stepped on it and all but severed both big toes, nude and bleeding in path of bloody footprints. I followed the action as far as the hole. Don't forget, Holly managed to instruct me as the detectives propelled her down the stairs. Please feed the cat. Of course I believed Madame Spinella to blame. She'd several times caught the authorities to complain about Holly. It didn't occur to me the affair could dire dimensions until the evening when Joe Bell showed up flourishing the newspapers. He was too agitated to speak sensibly. He chorused the room, hitting his fists together, while I read the accounts. Then he said, "You think it's so? She was mixed up in this lousy business?" "Well, yes." He popped and Tums in his mouth and, glaring at me, chewed it as though he were crunching my bones. "Boy, that's rotten. And you meant to be her friend? What a bastard." "Just a minute. I didn't say she was involved knowingly. She wasn't. But there, she did do it. Carry messages and what not." He said, "Take it pretty calm, don't you? Jesus, she could get 10 years. More." He yanked the papers away from me. "You know her friends, these rich fellows. Come down to the bar. We'll start phoning. Our girl's going to need financier schnitzers than I can afford." I was too sore and shaky to dress myself. Joe Bell had to help. Back at his bar, he propped me in the telephone booth and a triple martini and a brandy tumbler full of coins, but I couldn't think who to contact. Joe's was in Washington, and I had no notion where to reach him there. Rusty Troller? Not that bastard. Only, what other friends of hers did I know? Perhaps she'd been right when she said she had no one. Not really. I put through a call to Crestview, 56958, in Beverly Hills. The number long-distance information gave me for O.G. Berman. The person who answered said Mr. Berman was having a massage and couldn't be disturbed. "Sorry, try later." Joe Bell was incensed, told me I should have said it was a life or death matter, and he insisted on my trying Rusty. First, I spoke to Mr. Troller Butler, Mr. and Mrs. Troller. He announced we're at dinner, and might he take a message. Joe Bell shouted into the receiver, "This is an urgent, mister, life and death." The outcome was that I found myself listening rather. "So the former Meg Wildwood, are you stalkers?" she demanded. "My husband and I will positively sue anyone who attempts to contact our names with that raw, revolting, and degenerate girl. I always knew she was a hop head with no more morals than a hound bitch in heat. Prison is where she belongs, and my husband agrees 1,000%. We will positively sue anyone who..." Hanging up, I remembered old Doc down the Tulip, Texas, but no, Holly wouldn't like it if I called him. She'd kill me good. I rang California again. The circuits were busy, stayed busy. And by the time O.G. Behrman was on the line, I'd emptied so many martinis he had to tell me why I was phoning him. "About the kid, is it? I know already. I spoke already to Iggy Fitchstein. Iggy's the best shingle in New York. I said, 'Iggy, you take care of it. Send me the bill. Only keep my name anonymous.' See? Well, I owe the kid something. Not that I owe her anything. You want me to come down to it? She's crazy, a phony, but a real phony, you know. Anyway, they only got her in 10,000 bail. Don't worry, Eagle'll spring her tonight. It wouldn't surprise me if she's home already. But she wasn't, nor had she returned the next morning. And when I went down to feed her cat, having no key to the apartment, I used the fire escape and gained entrance through a window. The cat was in the bedroom, and he was not alone. A man was there, crouching over a suitcase. The two of us, each thinking the other is a burglar, exchanged uncomfortable stares as I stepped through the window. He had a pretty face, cured hair. He resembled Josie. Moreover, the suitcase he'd been packing contained the wardrobe Josie kept at Holly's. The shoes and suits she fussed over was always catering to menders and cleaners, and I said certain it was so. Did Mr. Yabra Jagger send you? I'm the cousin, he said with a very green and just penetrable accent. Where is Josie? He repeated the question, as though translating it another language. Ah, where is she? She's waiting, he said, and seemed to dismiss me. Resumed his valid activities. So the diplomat was planning a powder. Well, I wasn't amazed, or in the slightest sorry. Still, what a heartbreaking stunt. He ought to be horsewhipped. The cousin giggled. I'm sure he understood me. He shut the suitcase and produced a letter. My cousin, she asked me, leave that from his chum. You will oblige? On the envelope was scribbled for Miss H. Golightly, courtesy bearer. I sat down on Holly's bed and hugged Holly's cat to me, and felt so badly for Holly, every osa, as she could feel it for herself. Yes, I will oblige. And I did, without the least wanting to, but I hadn't courage to destroy the letter, or the will powder, to keep it in my pocket when Holly very tentatively inquired if by any chance I'd news of Josie. It was 2 mornings later. I was sitting by her bedside in a room that reeked of iodine and bedpans, a hospital room. She had been there since the night of her arrest. Well, darling, she'd greeted me as I tiptoed towards her carrying a carton of Pelicans cigarettes and a wheel of new autumn violets. I lost the hair. She looked not quite 12 years. Her pale vanilla hair brushed back, her eyes for once minus their dark glasses, clear as rain water. One wouldn't believe how ill she had been. Yet it was true. Christ, I nearly cooled. No floating. The fat woman almost had me. She was yakking up a storm. I guess I couldn't have told you about the fat woman, since I didn't know about her myself until my brother died. Right away, I was wondering where he'd gone, what it meant, Fred's dying. And then I saw her. She was there in the room with me, and she had Fred cradled in her arms, a fat, mean red bitch, rocking in a rocking chair, with Fred on her lap and laughing like a brass band. The mockery of it. But it's all that's ahead for us, my friend. This comedian waiting to give you the old razz. Now do you see why I went crazy and broke everything? Except for the lawyer O.G. Behrman had hired, I was the only visitor she'd been allowed. Her room was shared by other patients, a trio of triplet-like ladies who, examining me with an interest not unkind but total, speculated in whispered Italian. Holly explained that they think you're my downfall, darling. The fellow what done me wrong, and to a suggestion that she set them straight, replied, I can't. They don't speak English. Anyway, I wouldn't dream of spoiling their fun. It was then that she asked about Joe's. The instant she saw the letter, she squinted her eyes and bent her lips in a taut, tiny smile that advanced her legs immeasurably. Darling, she instructed me, would you reach in the drawers there and give me my purse? A girl doesn't read this sort of thing without her lipstick. Guided by a compact mirror, she powdered, painted every vintage of 12-year-old out of her face. She shaped her lips with one tube. colored her cheeks from another. She penciled the rims of her eyes, blued the lids, sprinkled with neck, with 4711, attached pearls to her ears, and donned her dark glasses, thus armored, and after I displeased a sprazzle of her manicure's shabby condition, she ripped open the letter and let her eyes race through it, while her stony small smile grew smaller and smaller and harder. Eventually she asked for a pecan, took a puff, taste bomb, but divine, she said, and tossing me with the letter. Maybe this will come in handy. If you ever write a red romance, don't go hoggy. Read it aloud. I'd like to hear it myself. It began, My dearest little girl. Holly at once interrupted. She wanted to know what I thought of the handwriting. I thought nothing. A tight, highly eligible, uneccentric script. It's him to a T, button-note, up and constipated. She declared, Go on, my dearest little girl. I have loved you knowing you were not as others, but convinced of my despair. Upon discovering in such a brutal and public style how very different you are from the manner of woman a man of my faith and career could hope to make his wife. Verily, I grieve for the disgrace of your present circumstance, and I do not find it in my heart to add my condemn to the condemn that surrounds you. So I hope you will find it in your heart not to condemn me. I have my family to protect, and my name, and I'm a coward where those intuitions enter. Forget me, beautiful child. I am no longer here. I'm gone home. But may God always be with you and your child. May God not be the same as Joe's. Well, in a very, it seems quite honest and even touching, the square ball jazz. But after all, he says he's a coward, and from his point of view, you must see. Holly, however, he did not want to admit that she saw. Yet her face, despite its cosmetic disguise, confessed it. All right, he's not a rat without reason. A supersized, King Kong-type rat, like Rusty. Benny Chiclet. But oh gee, Holly, goddamn. She said, jamming a fist into her mouth like a bawling baby. I did love him, the rat. The Italian trio imagined a lover's cries, and placing the blame for Holly's groanings where they felt it belonged, tut-tutted their tongues at me. I was flattered, proud that anyone should think Holly cared for me. She squinted when I offered her another cigarette. She swallowed and said, Bless you, Buster, and bless you for being such a bad jockey. If I hadn't had to play Calamity Jane, I'd still be looking forward to the grub in an unwed mama's home. Stamina's exercise. That's what did the trick. But I've scared Lamerde out of the whole badge department by saying it was because Miss Ducrow slapped me. Yes, sir. I can sue them for several counts, including false arrest. Until then, I'd skirted mention of her more sincere tribulations, and this jesting reference to them seemed appalling, pathetic. So definitely did it several how incapable she was of recognizing the bleak realistics before her. Now, Holly, I said, thinking, be strong, mature, and uncle. Now, Holly, we can't treat it as a joke. We have to make plans. You're too young to be stuffy, too small. By the way, what business is it of yours? None, except you're my friend, and I'm worried. I mean to know what you intend doing. She rubbed her nose and concentrated on the ceiling. Today is Wednesday, isn't it? So I suppose I'll sleep until Saturday? Really get a good shuffling. Saturday morning, I'll skip out to the bank. Then I'll stop by the apartment and pick up a nightgown or two and my main boater, following which I'll report to Idlewild, where, as you damn well know, I have a perfectly fine reservation on a perfectly fine plane. And since you're such a friend, I'll let you wave me off. Please stop shaking your head. Holly, you can't do that. Ed Turquoise Puss. I'm not hard faulting after Jose, if that's what you suppose. According to my census, he's strictly a citizen of Limboville. It's only, why should I waste a perfectly fine ticket? Already paid for. Besides, I've never been to Brazil. Just what kind of pills have they been fitting you here? Can't you realize you're under a criminal indictment? If they catch you jumping bail, they'll throw you away the key. Even if you get away with it, you'll never be able to come home. Well, so tough, Titty. Anyway, home is where you feel at home. I'm still looking. No, Holly, it's stupid. You're innocent. You've got to stick it out, she said. Raw, team raw, and blue smoke in my face. She was impressed, however. Her eyes were dilated by unhappy visions, as were mine. Iron rooms, steel corridors of gradually closing doors. Oh, screw it, she said, and tapped out her cigarette. I have a fair chance they won't catch me, provided you keep your poche firme. Look, don't despise me, darling. She put her hand over mine and pressed it with sudden immersed sincerity. I haven't much choice. I talked it over with the lawyer. Oh, I didn't tell him anything. Rio. He'd keep the badgers himself, rather than lose his fee, to say nothing of the nickels. O.G. put me up for bail. Bless O.G.'s heart. But once on the coast I helped him win more than 10 show in a single poker hand. We're square. No, here's a real shake. All the badgers want from me is a couple of free grabs and my services as the state's witness against Sally. Nobody has any intention of prosecuting me. They haven't a ghost of a case. Well, I may be rotten to the core, Mode, but testify against a friend I will not. Now, if they can prove he doped Sister Kenley, my yardstick is how somebody treats me. And old Sally, all right, he wasn't absolutely white with me. Say he took a slight advantage. Just the same, Sally's an okay shooter. And I'd never the fat woman snatch me sooner than help the law boys pin him down, tilting the compact mirror above her face, smoothing her lipstick with a crooked pinky, she said. And to be honest, that isn't all. Certain shades of limelight wreck a girl's complexion. Even if a jury gave me the Purple Heart, this neighborhood holds no future. That still have up every rope from LaRue to Pedora's Bar and Grill. Take my word, I'd be about as welcome as Mr. Frank E. Campbell. If you lived off my particular talent, Cookie, you'd understand the kind of bankruptcy I'm describing. I don't just fancy a fade-out that finds my belly bumping around Roseland with a pack of West Side hillbillies. While the excitement, Madame Troller sashays her twat in and out of Tiffany's. I couldn't take it. Give me the fat woman any day. And Nurse Soft Shoeing into the room advised that visiting hours were over. Holly started to complain that it was curtailed by having a thermometer popped in her mouth, but as I took leave, she unstoppered herself to say, "Do me a favor, darling. Call up the Times, or whatever you call, and get a list of 50 richest men in Brazil. I'm not kidding. The 50 richest, regardless of race or color. Another favor. Poke around my apartment till you find that medal you gave me. The St. Christopher. I'll need it for the trip. The sky was red Friday night. It thundered, and Saturday, parting day, the city swayed in a squall-like downpour. Sharks might have swum through the air, though it seemed improbable a plane could penetrate it. But wholly ignoring my cheerful conviction that her flight would not go, continued her preparations, placing, I must say, the chief burden of them on me. For she had decided it would be unwise of her to come near the brownstone, quite rightly so. It was under surveillance, whether by police or reporters or other interested parties, that one couldn't tell. Simply a man, sometimes men, who hung around the stoop. So she'd gone from the hospital to a bank to straight, then to Joe Bell's bar. She don't figure. She was followed. Joe Bell told me when she came with a message that Holly wanted me to meet her there as soon as possible, a half hour at most, bringing her jewelry, her guitar, toothbrushes and stuff, and a bottle of 100-year-old brandy. She says you'll find it heat down into the bottom of the dirty clothes basket. Yeah, oh, and the cat. She wants the cat. But hell, he said, I don't know we should help her at all. She ought to be protected against herself. Me, I feel like telling the cops. Maybe if I go back and build her some drink, maybe I can get her drunk enough to call it off. Stumbling, skidding, up and down the fire escape between Holly's apartment and mine. Wind blown and winded and wet to the bone, clawed to that bone as well, for the cat had not looked favorably upon evacuation, especially in such inclement weather. I managed a first-rate job of assembling her going-away belongings. I even found her son Christopher's medal. Everything was piled on the floor of my room, a poignant pyramid of bracers and dancing slippers and pretty things I packed in Holly's only suitcase. There was a mass left over that I had to put in paper grocery bags. I couldn't think how to carry the cat until I thought of stuffing him in a pillowcase. Never mind why, but I once walked him from New Orleans to Nancy's Landing, Mississippi, just under 500 miles. It was a light-hearted lark compared to the journey to Joe Bell's bar. The guitars filled with rain. Rain softened the paper sacks. The sacks split and perfume spilled on the pavement. Pearls rolled in the guitar, while the wind pushed the cat scratched. The cat screamed, but worse. I was frightened, a coward, to equal Rose. Those storming streets seemed as warm with unseen presences, waiting to imprison me for aiding an outlaw. The outlaw said, "You're late, Buster. Did you bring the brandy?" And the cat, released, leaped and perched on her shoulder. His tail swung like a baton conducting rhapsodic music. Holly, too, seemed inhabited by melody, some bouncy bon voyage. Papa. Uncorking the brandy, she said, "This was meant to be a part of my hope chest. The idea was, every anniversary, we'd have a swig. Thank Jesus I never bought the chest. Mr. Bell, sir, 3 glasses. You'll only need 2, he told her. I won't drink to your foolishness." The more she cajoled him, Mr. Bell, the lady doesn't vanish every day. Won't you toast her? The gruffer he was, "I'll have no part of it. If you're going to hell, you'll go on your own with no further help from me." An inaccurate statement, because seconds after he'd made a shuffled Limehouse drew up outside the bar, and Holly, the first to notice it, put down her brandy, arched her eyebrows, as though she expected to see a distinct attorney himself align. So did I. And when I saw Joe Bell blush, I had to think, by God, he did call the police. But then, with burning ears, he announced. It's nothing. One of them Kaylee Caddylises. I hired it to take you to the airport. He turned his back on us to fiddle with one of his flower arrangements. Holly said, Kind, dear Mr. Bell. Look at me, sir. He wouldn't. He wrenched the flowers from the vase and thrust them at her. They missed their mark, scattered on the floor. Goodbye, he said, and as though he were going to vomit, scurried to the men's room. We heard the door lock. The carriage chauffeur was a worthingly spiceman who accepted our splendid luggage most civilly, and remained rock-faced when at the limousine swished upon though as listening rain. Holly stripped off her clothes, the riding costume she'd never had a chance to substitute, and struggled into a slim black dress. We didn't talk. Talk could have only led to argument, and also Holly seemed too preoccupied for a conversation. She hummed to herself, swinged brandly. She leaned constantly forward to peer out of the windows, as if she was hunting in a dress, or, I decided, talking, at last impression of a scene she wanted to remember. It was neither of these. But these. Stop here, she ordered the driver, and we pulled to the curb of a street in Spanish Harlem, a savage, a garish, and moody neighborhood, garlanded with poster portraits of movie stars and Madonnas, sidewalks littering of fruit rind, and rotted newspaper were hurled about by the wind, for the wind still boomed, though the rain had hushed, and there were bursts of blue in the sky. Holly stepped out of the car. She took the cat with her. Cradling him, she scratched his head and asked, What do you think? This ought to be the right kind of place for a tough guy like you. Garbage cans, rats galore, plenty of cat bums to gang around with. So scram, she said, dropping him, and when he did not move away, instead of raising his stock face and questioned her with yellowish pirate eyes, she stamped her foot. I said, Bid it. He rubbed against her leg. I said, Off, she shouted, then jumped back in the car, slammed the door, and, Go, she told the driver. Go, go. I was stunned. Well, you are a bitch. I'd traveled a block before she replied. I told you. We just met by the river one day. That's all. Independence, both of us. We never made each other any promises. We never, she said, and her voice collapsed. A tick, an invalid whiteness seized her face. The car had paused for a traffic light. Then she had the door open. She was running down the street, and I ran after her. But the cat was not at the corner where he'd been left. There was no one, nothing on the street, except a urinating drunk and two Negro nuns, herding a file of sweet-singing children. Other children emerged from doorways, and ladies leaned over their windowsills to watch as Holly darted up and down the block, ran back and forth, chanting, You cat! Where are you, cat? She kept it up until a bumpy-skinned boy came forward dangling a tomboy, the scum of the neck. You want a nice kitty-meese? Give me $1. The limousine had followed us. Now Holly let me steer her towards it. At the door, she hesitated. She looked past me, past the boy still offering his cat. $1/2. Two bits, maybe, 2 bits. It ain't much. And she shuddered. She had to grip my arm to stand up. Oh, Jesus God. We did belong to each other. He was mine. Then I made her a promise. I said I'd come back and find her cat. I'll take care of him too, I promise. She smiled, that cheerless new pitch of a smile. But what about me, she said, whispered and shivered again. I'm very scared, Buster. Yes, at least because it could go on forever. not knowing what's yours until you've thrown it away. The mean rats, they're nothing. The fat woman, she's nothing. This, though, my mouth's so dry. If my life depended on it, I couldn't spit. She stepped in the car, sank in the seat. Sorry, driver, let's go. Tomato missing. And drug case actress believed Tangland victim. In due time, however, the press reported fleeing playgirl traced to Rio. Apparently, no attempt was made by American authorities to recover her, and soon the matter diminished to an occasional gossip column mention. As a news story, it was revived only once. On Christmas Day, when Sally Tomato died of a heart attack at Sing Sing, month went and a winter of them, and not a word from Holly. The owner of the brownstone sold her abandoned possessions, the white satin bed, the tapestry, her precious Gothic chairs. A new tenant acquired the apartment. His name was Quentin Smith, and he entered so many gentlemen callers of a nosy nature as Holly never had, ever had. Though, in this instance, Madame Spinella did not object. Indeed, she doted on the young man, and supplied Philip Mignon whenever he had a black eye. But in the spring, a postcard name. It was scribbled in pencil and signed with a lipstick kiss. Brazil was beastly, but Buenos Aires the best. Not Tiffany's, but almost. I'm joined at the trip with Duvine, Senor. Love. Think so. Anyhow, I'm looking for somewhere to live. Senor has wife, 7 brats, and will let you know address when I know it myself. Millie tenderesses. But the address, if it ever existed, never was sent, which made me sad. There was so much I wanted to write her. That I'd sold 2 stories, had read where the trawlers were countering for divorce, was moving out of the brownstone because it was haunted, but mostly I wanted to tell her about Cat. I had kept my promise. I had found him. I took weeks of after work roaming through those Spanish Harlem streets, and there were many false alarms. Flashes of tiger-striped fur that, upon inspection, were not him, but one day, one cold, sunshiny Sunday winter afternoon, it was, flanked by spotted plants and framed by clean lace curtains. He was seated in the window of a warm-looking room. I wondered what his name was, for I was certain he had one now. Certain he'd arrived somewhere he belonged. African hut or whatever. I hope Holly has too.